Welcome to another installment of Force 13 live coverage. Well, we could cover some of Bavi, but our main feature tonight is Hurricane Laura. And it's not there either, it's there actually. Laura's looking much better this evening. ATCF running with 80 miles per hour, so we're following that at the moment. National Hurricane Center will update at the end of the hour. Usually they go along with it. The eye is starting to become more apparent on satellite imagery. So Laura is making its run now towards the US Gulf Coast, and you can also see what's left of Marco there. A tiny little swirl off the coast of Louisiana. Still hasn't made landfall, but there it is, just off the coast, hugging the coast. Sorry about the impromptu start there. We had some issues that ran us a little bit late, just a couple of minutes thankfully. But here we are now, and we are here to stay for a while to talk about everything that's going on in the world of tropics, but these two main cyclones, really the biggest things going on right now. It's going to be mostly Laura. So you can send in all of your questions, start your message with Force 13 all in text, and we'll get right on them. In the meantime, let me introduce my team, which tonight consists of Dominic, Isaac, myself, my name's Nathan Foy, hello, Ryan Leahy is also here, Orlando, Strat, and Euxinado. Good evening to you all. Afternoon in some areas.
In the US.
Indeed, still afternoon in some areas there. Alright, so we've got this going on right now. Is it going the speed that you expected that it would go? We've been poring over model runs. We've been looking at everything on this storm for days on end now. It's getting a little bit tiring, but the biggest part of this is still yet to come. And now we've got sweeping evacuation orders along the coast. I don't know if there's been state of emergencies yet, because I've been out of the loop for a few hours, but I imagine there may have been.
Yeah, I mean, it's moving relatively the similar speed to what was anticipated in computer models and forecasts. So the landfall's generally expected still Thursday morning. That really what's trying to be figured out still is if it's going to move a bit further west, and that landfall's more when people are awake, you know, when it would typically be closer to rush hour, or if it's going to happen a bit further east in Louisiana and instead be potentially more in the wee hours of the morning towards 3 or 4 a.m.-ish. It could technically still be as early as midnight Thursday to 1 a.m. Thursday Central Time, based on some of the computer model indications right now.
Let's see if we can take a look at some rapid scan imagery. Well, there's some of it. Let's try and blow that up on the screen so that you can see the full evolution of Laura in the last, well, several minutes. This is probably over roughly a half-hour period, and you can see there the somewhat of an eye there, not a closed eye by the looks of things, because there's a little gap slot there in the southern side. You agreed on that?
Have to say so, and a lot of that goes back to its sort of evolution overnight when it was emerging off of the Cuba coastline. The western side was still mostly devoid of thunderstorm activity at that point in time. There wasn't really anything resembling an eye wall in the western half of the storm, so it's really still trying to finish closing that off fully. You know, obviously a much more symmetrical system around the center than we were seeing about 24 hours ago regardless, and as confirmed by reconnaissance aircraft, definitely a stronger storm too.
Yes, indeed. Let's see if we can go to our 6 panels, and here I am tonight as well. And this time I've got a screen with me, so that's wonderful. I can actually point at things as we move the camera over. Yeah, we're not very adept here. Move it down a little bit. You can see Laura entering the picture there. This is the Gulf Coast. You can see what's left of Marco just there off the coast of Louisiana, and this is Laura coming in from the southeast, and that track's going to take it up towards the well, first of all, west-northwest, at least at the moment, although it does look like it might be going slightly towards the northwest a little bit there in the latest frames. But eventually it will curve round into a landfall, we're thinking somewhere around the Texas-Louisiana border. And elsewhere on the imagery here, you can see everything else that's going on. A close-up of Bavi there, which is approaching South Korea, and 2 views actually of Laura. One of them's supposed to be Marco, but it may as well just be Laura.
Marco's really a shell of what it was 2 days ago at this
Let's
point.
not go there. There's a hurricane warning in effect, if you haven't heard, by the way. I'm sure this is probably not news to anyone, but a hurricane warning is in effect. We got to read this out: from San Luis Pass, Texas, to Intracoastal City, Louisiana. Storm surge warning for San Luis Pass as well to the mouth of the Mississippi River. A tropical storm warning for Sargent, Texas to San Luis Pass and east of Intracoastal City to the mouth of the Mississippi River. A storm surge watch for Freeport, Texas to San Luis Pass and the mouth of the Mississippi River to Ocean Springs, Mississippi, including Lake Pontchartrain, Lake Maurepas, and Lake Bourne. A hurricane watch for an area as well east of Intracoastal City to west of Morgan City, Louisiana. So those are where the watches and warnings are at the moment. If I press this button, at least one of the images will still be here. Well, yeah, there's what's left of Marco. That was before, that's dead now. But you can see on the left-hand side, that's the latest National Hurricane Center forecast cone on Laura. You can see an M there marked for the first time. That was with the last advisory several hours ago now. The next one will be at the top of this hour, and we'll bring it to you live. But for the first time, they're expecting a major hurricane. And what are our thoughts on this, team?
They were expecting.
I think especially with this event, there's definitely a possibility that the storm could overachieve that 115 mile per hour landfall intensity there. So specifically with this storm, if you're in the path of this, I would, instead of preparing for a Category 3 storm, be preparing for a Category 4 storm at this current rate right now. On satellite imagery, it's been trying to really form out that eye in the last few images. There's been two really pronounced deep convective bursts on the southern quadrant of the storm here, and also probably try to wrap around into the entire storm here and eventually form probably later on a well-defined eye in a few hours from now, by the looks of it. So a really dangerous situation here. If you haven't evacuated already, you have to do that as soon as possible. Pretty much all you have is today to evacuate. Tropical storm force winds will start to be felt on the Houston-Galveston area right about 8 or 9 p.m. not p.m., 8 a.m. 8 or 9 in the morning, last I checked, starting tomorrow. So if you haven't decided by then to either evacuate or stay put, then time will be running out for you. We got to decide as soon as possible whether or not you're going to stay or not. If you're along the coast, especially if you're on those mandatory and probably those voluntary evacuations, I would highly recommend evacuating out of the area.
Yeah. The NHC going with 115 miles per hour is fair. There's a lot of model consensus around it being a major hurricane at peak and at landfall, potentially, maybe even a Category 4, as Isaac said. So, yes, definitely residents along the Gulf Coast, particularly Texas, Louisiana, must be preparing for a very significant and very strong storm. There's a very significant threat of storm surge from the system because it is expected.
Weren't we talking about National Hurricane Center, I think, is saying 13 feet, is that right? That's something that I saw on the wires I've not seen myself.
9 to 13 feet of storm surge here. I'll pull up the storm surge, the peak surge expectations, so I'll read them out here. Between Freeport and San Luis Pass, 2 to 4 feet. Between San Luis Pass and Port Boulevard, 3 to 5 feet. Between Port Boulevard and Seagram State Park, 6 to 9 feet. Galveston Bay, 3 to 5 feet. And Seagram State Park, between Seagram State Park and Intracoastal City, 9 to 13 feet. Sabine Lake and Kalasku Lake, 9 to 13 feet. Vermilion Bay, 7 to 11 feet. Between Intracoastal City and Morgan City, 7 to 11 feet. Between Morgan City and the mouth of the Mississippi River, 4 to 6 feet. And between the mouth of the Mississippi River and Ocean Springs, Mississippi, 3 to 5 feet. And finally, Lake Pontchartrain and Lake Maurepas, 2 to 4 feet, and 3 to 5 feet expected in Lake Bourne.
And there is the graphic from the National Hurricane Center that I just threw up there. So you can see the peak surge and the expected storm track. Also, a threat from this storm naturally would be the rainfall. The rainfall potential possibly exceeding 10 inches along the coast where it could make landfall, and plenty inland as well, not only through Texas and Louisiana, but the latest graphic suggests that over 6 inches over large parts of Arkansas, and even up towards Pennsylvania, even 4 inches of rain could occur from the storm or its remnants.
Yeah, and this is actually an upgrade from earlier today too. I know in the latest video update that we had on the channel, these expectations, not just at the landfall zone, but further inland, were lower. There's a much wider swath now, further up into Arkansas even, where they're now expecting 6 to 10 inches of rainfall to occur with this system. So, that's really going to bring a very significant potential threat for flash flooding, especially as you head further inland with this, not just at the coastline where you're already going to be dealing with potentially major hurricane force sustained winds, storm surge, and of course that other heavy rainfall effect.
So we've got this rapid scan, which is, it's almost up to the second. Just checking the latest timestamp on this, just for your peace of mind. The last image on this sequence is 4 minutes ago, so it's very much almost up to the minute. It's about almost as close as you can get with satellite imagery products, and that's how the storm's looking with our eye. It's quite apparent, but it does look like there's a weakness there on the southern side that it's trying now to close up.
It has fired convection up in nearly the perfect places, southeast and southwest, to try and close in that eye wall and that eye, so it can try to commence intensification.
Exactly. It's really concerning to see that happening. I know when Recon was going in there earlier this morning, pretty much most of the stronger winds are in the northern and the northeastern quadrant, as they usually are with storms. But now, since we're getting those convective bursts south of the center of circulation, perhaps when the reconnaissance planes get in there, because we're scheduled to get 2 new reconnaissance planes that start to fly out within this hour, a NOAA plane and an Air Force plane that are expected to fly out within the hour to get more data on the storm. And it'd be really curious to see what they find on that southern quadrant out of those 2 bursts of deep convection they're trying to fire off near there to try to close off the eye for later on today, it looks like.
Strat, any comments on the rapid scan here?
I mean, obviously, again, more symmetrical than last night and a much tighter core with not really a lot of convection, at least at the very center of it. I know there's a bit of a southern tail on the zoom out, at least. There's much more on the northern side, at least comparatively to yesterday, and a tighter core system, which is what models are really indicating at. If it can really close out that southern side easily, that's when you could see that short period of rapid intensification the National Hurricane Center has been talking about for about a day or so now, that could lead up to this becoming a major hurricane. Interestingly, though, as I want to see their commentary on this at the top of the hour, too, they were specifically discussing how wind shear should likely increase, as indicated by computer models in the last 12 hours before landfall, although they didn't have much confidence in what sort of impact that might have on the storm, because if wind shear picks up to 15 to 20 knots at the last second before landfall in the last 12 hours, and it's very tightly defined system, as a major hurricane at that point, and very strong, it's going to be more difficult for shear to kind of blow it off than if it's had some structural reorganization through an eyewall replacement cycle and such right before that. So that's really going to be coming down to what happens in the next 24 hours or so with the storm to see if we're going to get lucky and have any bit of weakening at the last second before landfall. Notably, though, sea surface temperatures, even just off the coast there of Louisiana and Texas, are well 30 degrees for most of the region, and spots of 31 degrees Celsius as well. So very favorable sea surface temperatures ahead of the system.
There's the sea surface temperature chart. Again, I can never get this far zoomed in, so should we try it actually? Let's see if we can get some zoom in on this, because it's pretty useless without. I want to try and get us in on the Gulf of Mexico in particular, which might be of interest. It works like this sometimes.
And while you're doing that, I just want to
There's
answer
some of it.
I just want to answer a question too that someone had. They're asking, in general, where's the best place for this thing to make landfall in terms of population density? Where are the least amount of people really going to be? If you're talking,
Well.
data, and this isn't really up to date with this year. Of course, this is a census year, but that far southwestern county in Louisiana, in terms of the potential counties for a landfall and worst impacts to occur, it has the least population density right now. Of course, we'd rather this thing just dissipate right now and not impact any land. But if you want the lowest population density, it's going to be that particular county.
And this is a different situation from Hannah about 2 months ago. Hannah hit pretty much in the best case scenario.
Feels like 2 months. It was only one.
Oh, well, it's been a long day for me, but Hannah hit pretty much in the best case scenario for both the Brownsville and Corpus Christi. It hit in Kennedy County, which is pretty much the least. I think it's the second or third least populated county in the state of Texas, which is really good because it has less than 500 people that live in the entire county, and those people that live in the county are far inland enough to where they don't get affected by storm surge. So that was a great scenario for everybody there. But this one, right around the area where it's going to be like landfall, and no matter where you go, there's going to be at least some city of some sort that's going to be in the path of this, unfortunately. And when they do, the town that does get into the path of this eventually, it's going to be a rough ride for them, I imagine. Especially given that it's trying to form out that eye right about now. It looks like once it gets the convection on its southern side, wrapping around to its northern side, and gets more equalized and centralized, then all bets are off, and this storm could intensify nearly as much as it wants for the most part until it makes landfall.
Now, models, they've been trending downwards slightly, have they?
In terms of intensity?
Ever so slightly in the last update at 12Z. From
Yeah,
what I saw. Apart from the ECMWF. Is that what I saw earlier?
The ECMWF was predicting, I believe, if memory serves me right, a 947 millibar landfall, I think just to the east of Houston, I want to say, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I believe it was actually, I'll check again, but I think it was close to the upper 930s, but I'll have to check again for that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the ECMWF updated today, and it came out with a 937 millibar peak, at least in the hours it shows. It's a concerning forecast and outlook from the ECMWF.
It's very rare. Keep in mind, it's very, very rare to see the ECMWF go that low for systems. Usually they only go down maybe 980, you would see, maybe 990, somewhere around there. But this is a 940. What was it? You said 937, right?
937.
Yes, it's one of the lowest pressures, if not the lowest pressure I've ever seen from the ECMWF.
It's quite a low one.
Yeah. It's really concerning to see, and the ECMWF has pretty much been kind of the western outlier for this storm. It's been adamant about this tracking farther west than the other models have been forecasting, like the GFS, the ICON model, the CMC. It's been adamant about that. So we'll see if that comes to fruition or not here.
Now, I just saw a question there which I've got to answer about. Did you just see what happened with the NAM 3 kilometer? It called for 195 mile an hour sub 900 millibar storm, which it's been doing a lot of lately, and that's because it does that all the time. Whenever there's anything in the Gulf of Mexico, it goes nuts, and it's done it again.
The Gulf of Mexico.
If you're going to trust any NAM, it'll be the 12 kilometer, which is less resolution, but in my opinion, more accurate.
Exactly. I mean, I think it was earlier this morning or late last night. It was one in I think it was an 898 millibar storm making landfall in Louisiana. So yeah, definitely don't want to trust an M3 kilometer. It's not suited for tropical cyclone forecasting at all. It's more for severe weather.
Yeah, and severe weather. The severe weather is, in fact, on Thursday, it's also predicted that we will indeed see severe weather, not just in the rainfall location, but elsewhere in the United States as well.
I was seeing some questions in the chat about the Houston and Galveston area. I know, Isaac, you're in Texas, so you'll probably be able to explain really well, much more of the local geography. But for people asking about that, there is a hurricane warning and storm surge warning in place for Galveston, and there's a tropical storm warning in place for Houston right now. The hurricane warning stops a bit short of there. If there's westward deviations in the track, though, and I'm sure you can attest to this, Isaac, they'll probably have those warnings extended further west, and that's when you could see Houston potentially in line for hurricane conditions, but landfall expectations are near the Texas-Louisiana border right now.
Yeah, if the storm, and this is a big if here, if the storm does deviate more to the west, like the ECMWF has been adamant about, and I think the UK might as well, if it does that, then it's going to push all that surge in from, I believe it's Galveston Bay, if memory serves me right. It's going to push all that in, try to push it into about Pasadena, Baytown, Texas there, so it wouldn't be a good scenario at all if it does end up passing just to the west of downtown Houston there. I personally have friends and family in the area, but thankfully they're in like one of the highest elevation parts of the town, so they're fine from it. The only thing they got to worry about is the wind at this point from the storm, fortunately. And they've already prepared for this. They got everything ready to go. They're charging their phones. They have batteries ready to go in case the power goes out, and they're well enough prepared to go under this hurricane here. They've been through Ike in 2008, so I'm sure it's not their first experience here with the hurricane, because they went through the eye wall of Hurricane Ike in 2008, and I'm sure that must have been a really scary experience for them.
Sure. We're staying on the air for a while tonight. Not sure exactly how long just yet, but we'll be here for a fair portion of this evening. So stay tuned as we continue to watch Laura and try to make sense of where it's headed now. Obviously, we know where it's going, but the main question really on everyone's mind is how strong. And how strong is it in real time? 80 miles an hour is probably what the National Hurricane Center will go with at their update in about half an hour's time. And of course, we've got several other streams across the Force 13 network. On our main channel, we've got the 24/7 stream showing all tropical activity, as well as a live feed of Typhoon Bavi for those on the Asian continent who are interested in that, which is also going to be a potentially devastating storm in South Korea in the next 48 hours. And on the Force 13 US channel, we've got full live imagery without commentary of the satellite imagery of Laura, and when it gets close to the land, we'll also have a radar on there as well. So plenty of places to take a look at the very latest whilst we're chatting away here. There's loads of questions. Could Laura stall or slow?
Not likely. This is not supposed to be a Harvey where it slows down or even tries to stall at landfall here. It's not going to do that.
Yeah, the steering current's pretty well defined with the system, and if you want to see, a really good synopsis about at least the initial parts, it's going to be in the National Hurricane Center's forecast discussion. It's going to start rounding the edge of the Bermuda High, really, which is nudged very strongly westward and allowed it to get to its current point. And when it moves inland, the main factor at that point is still going to be the area of high pressure. It's going to be rounding that, which could allow for some slower forward motion than we've seen in the past few days with the system. So we may see, the forward speed slow down from closer to, I think we're at still 16 miles an hour. You could easily see that slow down a bit, but not enough to create any stalling motion, because by the time we get towards days 2.5 to day 3, a trough's going to come, pick this storm up, and pull it extremely quickly across the eastern United States. And by day 5, this thing's actually supposed to be off the eastern seaboard again, and actually gaining wind speed as it turns post-tropical.
I must say, this is looking a bit better on the infrared. This is what we've got right here on my screen, and I'm here as well, but that's not important. You can see here that what we're looking at mainly is this little weakness here, which is starting to be filled in by the red zones, which is the convective clouds that are blowing up around the center of the storm. Obviously, you can see its eye there, which is starting to be clouded over by those high clouds now. The northern side's looking decent. It's pushing out quite some way now. The southern side, it looks a bit odd down there, you got to admit. There's a break here, and then you've got this southern band which is pushing down, but I think Laura really is well on its way looking at this imagery.
if you want to give a comparison really to kind of the extension of another blob of convection away from the core circulation, you know, an example of that would probably be Matthews at Cat 1. It had that huge blob of convective activity, but displaced to the east of it. This time it's associated to the south of it, which means that the Yucatan Peninsula is getting probably some impacts right now associated with at least rainfall and some probably minimal risks of flash flooding associated with just those thunderstorm activities that are probably reaching on shore because of that. But the core of the system is much further north, getting towards the central Gulf of Mexico now, really.
Yep. So if you've just joined us, we are tracking Hurricane Laura, which is a Category 1. It was declared a hurricane earlier today. Was it this morning?
It was at like 7:15
was-
a.m. Central.
Lose track of time so easily. Early this morning in the
It was
US,
early
around
this
lunchtime
morning.
here in the UK. But obviously that happened some time ago now, and Laura may be a little bit stronger. We're going to get official confirmation from the National Hurricane Center in about half an hour. We're thinking it's going to go up to at least 80 miles per hour. And it won't take long until, at this rate, until Laura becomes the strongest storm of the season, because we've not had anything over 85 yet, have we?
No,
we had-
Hannah was 90.
Sorry?
Hannah was 90 miles per hour.
Officially?
Yeah.
Yeah, officially it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't remember that. Isaias was
He's
85.
85, right? Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Although that one could have been stronger, especially with that storm surge. And
Oh, absolutely.
so when we're thinking about actual landfall here, then what time?
Probably Thursday morning, it seems like. Probably like very early Thursday morning, like possibly before sunrise.
Yeah, the latest it can really happen if it moves west and a bit outside the forecast cone towards, you know, the Houston area would be closer to 8 a.m. Central Time. Would be the latest you'd expect if that scenario were to occur. But models are pretty clear cut right now, at least, that it's going to be earlier in the morning, closer to 2 to 5 a.m. Central Time. If it goes east of forecast, that could potentially happen a little bit earlier as well. And I think Isaac
Always
has
in
something
the
to share
middle
right
of the
now
night.
from the governor.
Oh,
Yes, Governor Greg Abbott 4 hours ago was given a list of mandatory and voluntary evacuations for the Texas coastline here. I'm going to go ahead and read them out. And this is as of 4 hours ago, so they may have changed a little bit here with time. But as of 4 hours ago, he states that local mandatory evacuations are in effect for Jefferson County, Texas, Orange County, Texas, the city of Galveston, Texas, city of Port Arthur, and then local voluntary evacuations are in effect for Chambers County, Texas, city of Nassau Bay, Texas, and also the city of Seabrook, Texas. And those are, again, voluntary and mandatory evacuations in effect as of 4 hours ago, according to Greg Abbott.
I imagine that list will grow.
I agree.
Someone asked in the chat a long time ago, what do you think? Do you think Laura is a Cat 2? What are the satellite estimates? Well, I just ran the first raw SATID estimates,
Uh-oh.
which are
Here we
satellite estimates. Before I say what they are, please do keep in mind that they don't work well with developing systems like
Oh,
this.
that means it's going to be a silly high intensity then.
No, it's actually gone with 70 miles per hour.
70 miles. I don't know about that.
Nice
Yeah.
for a one.
There's some subjectivity in SATID, really, but we have the recon data from earlier saying at least
Yeah.
75. The appearance has improved since then, so ATCF, the Navy files, have gone with 80 miles an hour. Recon's heading into it soon, so we'll probably see, get a confirmation of that and see if it's moving a bit above that as well.
They might. I think they might get a high-end Cat 1 at the next pass.
They could, but not a Category 2 at this point in time, at least in almost all certainty.
Well,
The intensity-
you can't be fully certain that it's
Okay.
not a Category 2, but
If that happens, I'll actually cry, dude.
the
We'll see because there's 2 reconnaissance planes that are scheduled to take off during this later on this hour here, and they'll probably be in the storm in about an hour or two after that. So it'll be interesting to see if they what type of winds they record and pressures they record from the storm.
Honestly, one of the most interesting things that I'm waiting for with the next update from the National Hurricane Center is their full intensity guidance, because the storm did intensify this morning faster than they anticipated. up to 80 miles. Right now, they're only expecting it to be around 75 miles an hour at this point. But interestingly, the model guidance for intensity, at least the interpolated models, has come down a little bit since this morning. Not as many saying major hurricane in the 18s, the interpolated model run set, as they were this morning. So I'm assuming, based on the trends that we're seeing, and likely Reconnaissance data, the National Hurricane Center will still go with the major hurricane intensity as their peak and near landfall, of course. But the potential dynamic with shear at the last approach to landfall could be muddying up some of the indications that the computer models are giving right now for peak intensity. So going to be very interesting to watch what the National Hurricane Center says.
We'll actually get model data when it comes out as well. We've got the usually it's the NAM that comes first, and we might already have that, followed by the ICON, then the GFS. I'm not sure what comes after that, but we'll look out for those three and any more that occur. We're going to take a very short break here, and we'll be back with more coverage on Laura. We're not going anywhere. Stay tuned. Indeed. So, yes, you can also chat amongst fellow storm trackers as well on our Discord server. A very vibrant place right now, it has to be said. But we're back here with the latest on Hurricane Laura, which we're continuing to track by the minute, as you can see. This is barely just a few minutes old satellite imagery rapid scan from GOES 16. And you can see how Laura is progressing, an apparent eye, probably not a fully closed eye just yet, but nearly, and it does appear to be filling out right now. Team.
I mean, it definitely looks like it's trying to close off that southeastern side that was more open earlier today and was the weakest side until very recently when we had these hot towers blow up across the southeastern quadrant trying to fill in. It's kind of clouding over what was trying to come out as an eye for the time being, but that doesn't mean that the storm is weakening at all. It's just an indication that there's convective activity at the upper levels kind of covering it up for the time being. The eye wall is, of course, still there. If there was radar, you'd probably still see an eye very clearly, likely close to completion at this point in time. And
I'll tell you one thing. I'm not sure you'll be able to see the stream output, team, but what I'm showing at this point, you can see this is the imagery of Laura at 6:58 UTC, so that is what we're talking, an hour and a half. And if I just go straight to the end, you'll notice the difference how it looks now. That looks far stronger than it did at 6:58, and that last image there is 8:33. That's just 2 minutes ago. That's the latest image of Laura, and you can see some deeper cloud tops on the southern side as well. They're getting into sort of darker shades of red, so that's minus 70-ish. On the northern side, not quite so good just yet, but the structure is really there, and it has been for some time. You know, Devon was remarking a few days ago on how nice, how good the outflow of Laura was looking when it was moving over the Greater Antilles. But it certainly appears to be getting its shape together right now, and what the least we can say is that the National Hurricane Center forecast needs to be taken seriously. We know that Marco didn't live up to its expectations, according to the National Hurricane Center. Hurricane warning to nothing, but this is something totally different.
Yeah, it really is.
Something to note about on the landfall forecast, as in the time, On the NHC forecast, the landfall time has gradually moved further and further away. So that may continue, that may not, but Laura is slowing down slowly, and definitely a big storm.
It's really going to be a question on how much that can either allow the storm to either remain over favorable conditions or whether or not it's going to happen in a period where wind shear is increasing to the point where it might become more of a detriment for it to stay over water longer. Regardless, though, still a potentially major threat to land. And there's a question, I think Isaac, as someone has had to prepare for multiple hurricanes and evacuated on stream before, can answer.
Yes.
How would you prepare differently during a pandemic ahead of a storm like this? Would you do certain things earlier if you're evacuating? Would you consider getting out of a place earlier and planning more ahead to have a set place to go? What would you do in that situation?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I want to stress I'm not I don't work for CDC, so I'm not 100% filled in on the exact guidelines that they put in place. But I know the city of Houston and the places around it have set up a really good system. To my understanding, the way that they did it over in Corpus, at least, they had shelters open, but they had to wear masks and, of course, social distance. But the shelters were readily available to you. They had buses so you could go to the shelters if we didn't have any ways of transportation to get into them. And I saw earlier in the city of Houston that they had buses all ready and set to go in the morning, and this was like 5-6 hours ago on daybreak. And they had buses ready to go and set to go to evacuate people that aren't able to evacuate themselves to those shelters around the Houston area and safer parts of Texas here in preparation for this hurricane. So I imagine there are lots of areas and places to evacuate for this storm. I don't know all the exact places, of course. I would recommend listening to your local officials here. But needless to say, if you are under a mandatory evacuation, especially, I would highly recommend to get out of there. They're doing it to save your lives here. They're not doing it to make your life harder. They're doing it to save your lives here. This is a serious storm we're talking about here, and not a storm to take lightly at all whatsoever.
The JTWC has issued its latest forecast on Typhoon Bavi. It's the one over there in the middle of the screen. As you can see, half of me there on the top right-hand side. Let me just try and get that screen better prepared for you of Bavi. But it's now forecast to make landfall... Can't even find which one it is. This one. To make landfall probably in North Korea, and it will pass uncomfortably close to the western coast of South Korea, and it will be packing winds of probably 115 miles per hour as it does that. We already have it down as 115 right now. The JTWC still going with 110 miles per hour, but not much difference in it. So it is what it is. But there it is right now. It's looking decent, certainly a borderline category 3. We'll be talking more about that later as Asia wakes up. It's still quite early in the morning there, but for the time being, most of our coverage is dedicated to Laura, and probably will be for some time, considering its threat right now. There we are with the rapid scan once again, which is almost always up to date. National Hurricane Center will be updating shortly. In fact, they already have. No changes to the warnings. They're now saying that it's 80 miles per hour with a pressure of 990 millibars, so no surprises there. 80 mile per hour winds, that's right now. It's currently moving west-northwest at 15 knots, which is about 18 miles per hour. That's at 24.7 north, 88.3 degrees west. They're expecting a peak, and at landfall they're expecting 115 miles per hour, and not really much change there in the forecast from what we already know. No changes in the warnings.
No, and this kind of actually goes to something that a question earlier in chat asking, how big will the storm be? I think they're referencing size for it, and if you look at the map from the National Hurricane Center, I'm sure the track update's going to be out soon. And you'll see the warnings.
Don't hold your breath. It can sometimes be half an hour till that track
sometimes
comes
you can but even in the newest one, you can see it pretty clearly that the warnings extend significantly further to the east of where they're expecting the center to make landfall than to the west. So the anticipation is that the worst impacts and at least how the storm is shaped at the time of landfall in terms of potential wind radius. Of course, the strongest sides on the east of the system, and really the wind field's been lopsided to the east for much of its lifetime so far. They're not really expecting that to change fully by the time it makes landfall, even if it's a much stronger storm. The largest wind radius will still be on the eastern side, even though there's likely going to be hurricane force sustained winds all over in all four quadrants away from the center at the time it makes landfall.
The National Hurricane Center have already released their discussion, which I may as well read out as we look at this satellite imagery. It says that satellite imagery shows some changes in the convective pattern of Laura since the last advisory, and I'm sure you've all noticed that. The ragged central dense overcast seen earlier has been replaced by a curved convective band, if I can even say it, that wraps almost all the way around a cloud-filled banding type eye. They wrote Eve there. One possible reason for this change is that the imagery also suggests a tongue of dry air is trying to entrain to the cyclone just west of the central convection. We've seen evidence of that. Aircraft data received after the last advisory did not show any fall in the central pressure, but did have high enough flight level and SFMR winds to justify nudging the initial intensity up to 70 knots, which is 80 miles per hour. No change in the forecast philosophy since the last advisory, so it's as you were. The hurricane is currently on the south side of a large deep layer ridge over the southeastern United States, and it's moving towards a break in the ridge caused by mid to upper level troughing over Texas and the southern Great Plains. The current and forecast synoptic pattern should steer Laura west-northwestward this evening, followed by a turn towards the northwest tonight and towards the north by Wednesday night and Thursday. This will result in the hurricane making landfall in the area of southwestern Louisiana or the upper Texas coast late Wednesday night or Thursday morning. They do say the new forecast track has a slight eastward nudge during the first 12 to 24 hours, but the landfall position is almost unchanged from the previous forecast. So that's interesting. They also say, actually, this is important, it should also be noted that the current forecast track lies to the east of the ECMWF and UK Met models, so it's still possible that the forecast track could nudge westward in later advisories.
Yeah, and also interesting to note the cone just came out for the newest update, and it looks to me that they have it making a landfall around 1 in the morning Thursday.
Yep, 6 a.m. UTC on Thursdays. That would be 1 a.m. Central Time. As a 115 mile per hour Category 3 range of hurricane.
And notably, for people that are curious about intensification, they do note that the only thing really stopping it from rapid intensification in the next 24 hours so will likely be if that dry air that's trying to fight its way into the system is more successful than it's been to date. So they still are expecting very quick intensification of the next 24 hours, but that increasing wind shear in the last 6 to 12 hours before landfall could slow down the intensification trend at the last second.
Even the wind fields have stayed the same. It's all the same. Not much. That is a real nothing update. I'm not criticizing or anything. That really nothing has changed in the forecast.
If anything, really, it's much more of a reiteration of the threats that are already there. We'll probably almost certainly get new information, though, that may lead to some changes with the recon planes when they come into the system within the next couple hours. That'll give more new information and allow some adjustments to be made to forecasts if need be.
All right. Well, viewer reaction. Send any questions in or any comments you want us to know about. Start your message with Force 13 all in text. It will light up in the comments section. Laura is not unchanged, but it's at 80 miles per hour. Unchanged from the ATCF, which we knew was going with 80 miles an hour before the stream started tonight. But it is an upgrade from the last National Hurricane Center advisory. And a no change in the pressure at 990 millibars. What are the chances of regeneration of Laura after exiting the US East Coast? I think it's got a realistic chance.
I think it does, yeah.
It's going to depend on where it exits, though, more than anything else. If it exits,
Right.
north, if it exits at any latitude of Virginia, really, or north, models indicate that it's going to be too far north to really regenerate, not because it won't have any brief time period over the Gulf Stream, but because it's going to be getting absorbed by this trough and moving into Atlantic Canada at that point. If it deviates to the south of expectations between days 4 and 5 and tries to emerge, moving more easterly and off the Carolina coastline instead, then it might have a chance to stay more independent from the trough and try to reorganize itself, which is something that models were trying to say could happen a few days ago when the track forecast is further east than it is right now. It really isn't too likely at the moment, at least, as someone that lives in the Northeast and is watching this for potential rainfall impacts. But, it can technically occur.
A raft of new questions here. Do you think it will be a minimal Category 4 at landfall?
I mean, it's certainly possible.
Yep,
The model
definitely.
guidance suggests it's possible. The NHC aren't going with it at the moment, but yes, it's possible, and we should prepare for the worst case scenario, always.
Do you think Laura can go a bit north and east of the National Hurricane Center cone? Seems to be doing that right now.
Yep. I mean, they did say that the 6 to 12 hour points in their cone is going to be an adjustment a bit to the north and east of the old one. So, and that's already been seen comparatively to the old one. But they are expecting a landfall in a similar location, very similar as the last full advisory, right around the Texas-Louisiana border. The cone of uncertainty exists for a reason, so keep that in mind. And with a system like this, potential impacts with rainfall, and storm surge, and even tropical storm force winds, especially when the storm's getting close to landfall, will extend very likely outside of where the cone is. Hurricane warnings right now, if you have that up on the screen, extend further out than where the cone of uncertainty is. So see the cone and realize that impacts will extend away from that.
By some distance, the cone is already, the wind field is already larger than the cone is at landfall there.
Yeah, that's true. I think, there's some questions about intensity. I think,
Plenty of them, yes.
we mentioned briefly some of the forecast discussion, but, a period of rapid intensification is likely in the next 24 hours or so, and that should get it up to or near major hurricane strength. But the last 6 to 12 hours before landfall, even though it's still going to have very warm sea surface temperatures, will also have increasing wind shear and, of course, the beginnings of some land interaction. They're expecting intensification will slow down at that point. They're not saying it will halt or reverse towards weakening before landfall right now, but something like that, less favorable conditions right at the last point to landfall will likely prevent it from becoming a strong an upper end Category 4 or Category 5 system, but it still is on the table if it goes above expectations right now set out by models and the National Hurricane Center that a Category 4 could occur. So if you're under a hurricane warning, you should be preparing as if such a thing will happen. It's always better to over-prepare than under-prepare.
A question there. Why does it look like it's heading towards eastern Louisiana? Well, at the moment, you might have a bit of a case there. If you extrapolate the movement, no, not quite. It's difficult to tell, but it's still moving towards western Louisiana if you extrapolate that.
Yeah, I mean, it would have to take a significant unexpected deviation to have the landfall point change from relatively close to where it is right now towards eastern Louisiana and New Orleans at this point. While technically not impossible, it's exceedingly unlikely to have such a thing occur.
Gonna see if I can get on my screen now as well. Some of the... Oh, that's bright. Well, this is the water vapor imagery, for some reason with extremely bright blue sides. But you can see again a little bit of a weakness there, definitely on the eastern side. You can see that there. That's dry air interaction, probably encircling the storm around the western side. The yellow areas there, those are dry air pockets around the storm. Obviously, the deep shades of green, that's where the most moisture is. That's where you'll get the highest rainfall rates, most likely. Not always, because it's an interpolation from satellite imagery, but usually it's around probably almost right. But again, you can see those convective tops, and they've actually merged there now. So the southern side might be getting its act together. Northern side still needs a little bit more work. It's actually decayed a little bit, I suppose, as a reaction to that southern side building up. So it's still got a little way to go yet, but I imagine from here on in, this convection will continue to band and wrap round the eye, and until it has a full eye wall, I suppose.
Nothing really to expect that such a thing won't occur at this point in time, unfortunately. If we're really taking a look at the core center of the system, much more symmetrical than yesterday, even if the thunderstorm activity to the north of the center isn't as robust as the southern side for the time being.
Yeah, let's see, any more questions that have come in? There's probably been a lot that we've missed. When do you think it will clear out its eye?
Well, it's trying to right now.
It is. Could Bavi still become a Category 4 at this point? That's unlikely now. That is unlikely.
Yeah.
There's another question I saw. What are the thoughts on what's remaining of Marco starting to feed into Laura? Do you think it will add to Laura's strength?
I mean, it doesn't really happen usually. There could be some technical interaction, but because Marco's really just a swirl, it doesn't have any real energy left with it, as everything's been sheared off away from the system. It won't strengthen the storm if, say, it lingers around long enough to get sucked in by Laura's broader circulation at that point in time. But it's really more of just a low-level swirl that doesn't have anything to it at this point.
Certainly looks that way. I'm sure you won't be feeling it on land right now, really.
No, and there hasn't been any warnings in place for it. Even when it made landfall as a tropical storm strength system, there were no warnings in place.
That's crazy. Did it actually make landfall, though?
Yeah, it made landfall at like 6 p.m. Central Time. We were live when it happened.
Oh, you were? That was last night when.
Yeah, it was last night
when I couldn't make it. It weren't my fault.
Yep, made landfall in the mouth of the Mississippi.
Made landfall. Yeah, it's a 40-mile-an-hour storm, and they had no warnings out because they expected it to become a depression in the next update.
When was the last time that's happened?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
No warnings for a landfalling storm.
I don't think that's ever happened. Not that I can think of. It probably has, but...
I don't know. Well, there we go. If Laura... Well, actually, two questions. Why has Laura already broken 3 recon planes? Can you explain rain-contaminated wind increases?
I'm not really as much sure about the rain contamination one, but at least in terms of breaking reconnaissance aircraft, I think they're talking about one of them earlier this morning that had like a 2-hour gap in its reporting, then reported again for 20 minutes and stopped reporting again after that. So we were in a situation this morning, at least, where there was a significant time period where there's just a complete lack of any information from one of the recon planes coming in. There was a second one in, but I guess you could say pretty fairly that there's been some notable data gaps so far in reporting with this storm.
Yeah, definitely. And the other question, if Laura undergoes explosive development and gets to a high-end Category 4, would the surge be more than 20 feet because of how low-lying Louisiana is?
Category 3, which is still a very powerful storm, and those in Louisiana and Texas that are under hurricane warning should be preparing as if it's a kind of Category 4 storm at landfall, because it's better to be over-prepared than under-prepared. But such an event occurring to say, and I'm assuming when he says, or that person's saying high-end Category 4, they're saying 150 miles an hour or so, is exceedingly unlikely at this time, especially since some of the interpolated intensity guidance models actually backed off a bit in their latest runs.
How is the North Indian Ocean doing? Not very well, probably, because it's not really the time for that one.
Yeah.
Ocean.
usually dead around this time of year.
Well, there was an invest yesterday, actually.
Oh, don't.
It was 98B, and I don't think it's expected to develop anymore because it's not even marked by the JTWC. But it's been bringing some inclement conditions to coastal Bangladesh and northeastern India for quite a few days now. It's kind of meandered and is expected to move back inland in the next 24 to 36 hours ago. So from now, at least. So development's not really expected anymore in regards to that.
We're still watching the satellite imagery here. Rapid scan, 1 minute imagery. It's almost completely up to date. And, well, looks like that eye could pop out soon or overnight or at some point. The situation's not looking so grand right now. Let's put that one straight. But keep sending your questions. Start your message with Force 13 all in text. Or, of course, you can join us on any of our social platforms. Facebook, Twitter, of course here on YouTube and on our Discord server. We're going to take a short break here. We'll be back with another hour of coverage after this. Live coverage will continue in a moment. During this major worldwide tropical cyclone event, the Force 13 US channel will be showcasing live satellite and radar imagery of Hurricane Laura. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Our second hour of coverage on Hurricane Laura this evening, August 25th, Tuesday evening is beginning in the US, 5 p.m. on the East Coast, 4 p.m. Central and 10 p.m. here at Force 13 HQ. Well, we've got Laura on the picture there, and you can see it's gathering momentum as it moves across the Gulf of Mexico, moving northwestwards. Hurricane warnings are in effect. and we've got a whole team here to talk about it. My name is Nathan Foy. I'm joined by Dominic, Isaac, Hayden, Ryan, Orlando, Strat, and Euxinada. Good evening to you all once again.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Evening.
So, I think we're going to be hunkering down and watching this for a little while tonight, because it would appear that it is in a key moment that it's developing and organizing itself right now, and the National Hurricane Center would acknowledge that it's changed its structure and is now a, what do they call it? The it's banding. They said that much as well.
They said
Less of a direct CDL, more banding features with it right now.
they called it a curved convective band.
That's
feature.
the one.
Yeah.
So we think it's well, it is intensifying. That's clear. 80 miles an hour is what they've gone with, but they're not really basing that off any current observations, are they?
More any recon data.
When was the last recon?
It's right after the 2 p.m. Eastern Time, so 1 p.m. Central Time update was when the last recon plane was leaving the storm. So it's been a few hours.
A while ago.
And they're using data from that, which is a little above 65 knots SFMR readings, and the general appearance of the system on satellite metrics that they use to determine that estimate right now. We're going to get more data, though, pretty shortly with new recon craft.
Yes, I was going to say that there will be at least 2 new recons entering within the hour, probably within the next.
I must note though that they haven't took off yet, so they may be trying to sort out maybe some problems that they had in the previous flights here. But yeah, no takeoff from them just yet.
Okay. Well, either way, we also have can someone bring up the storm surge graphics, because we have a very concerning situation.
Yeah, we got that.
For southwestern and Louisiana and southeastern Texas.
Here it is.
National Weather Service says
It-
this surge from Laura could penetrate up to 30 miles inland from the immediate coastline in southwestern Louisiana and far southeastern Texas. Actions to protect life and property should be rushed to completion this evening, as water levels will begin to rise on Wednesday.
Euxinada?
So,
Yes, and this is obviously very concerning, because knowing that Louisiana is a low-lying country, this could render some of the areas inundated by a storm surge completely underwater.
13 feet. How does that compare to other storms that have impacted that area?
I have actually done some research. I believe Rita had a storm surge of 15 feet in southwestern Louisiana, and I think Ike in 2008 had a similar storm surge. So probably storm surge could be compared to what was experienced in Rita and Ike, and unfortunately those were devastating storms for the southwestern Louisiana coast. So we hope that everybody is taking all the warnings very seriously. This is not something to take lightly at all. This could be a very serious storm surge event, and you need to heed all of the you need to listen to your local officials. If you're told to evacuate, you have to evacuate. You cannot. You have to listen to your to the authorities, because they're only trying to keep you safe. They're trying to get you out of harm's way, and
They know what they're doing. They're doing it to help you out here. They're not doing it just for the fun of it to ruin your day. They're doing it to save your life, because this is a serious storm that's going to be impacting the coastline here between Louisiana and Texas, or between the borders there. So storm to take really seriously here. And like Ryan was alluding to earlier, if you haven't prepared already, you have all of today to prepare. If you haven't done so already, to get everything done all of today. And then at about, I think it's 9 or 8 in the morning, Central Standard Time tomorrow is when the earliest reasonable time for tropical storm force winds should arrive along the coastline here from from Hurricane Laura. So if you don't have your preparations done by about 8 or 9 in the morning tomorrow, then it's pretty much too late to prepare or evacuate for that matter, and you just either hunker down in a local shelter nearby you, or just ride it out and hope for the best.
Looking back on my screen here, it does appear to be getting larger, but what I am also seeing is that towards the center of the storm there in those later frames, not full cohesion in those largest cloud tops, the deepest ones. So it's not fully on board at the high levels by the looks of things, and as you can see, of course, the cloud tops are obscuring the storm's eye. The northern side's still a little bit lacking, but overall it is getting better, and especially when you look at the southern side, there's more red appearing on the screen compared to the beginning of that, and you can start to see just towards the end of that loop a few more darker areas starting to appear right about there. Those are the hottest towers right now, just to the south of the storm's eye, so that will continue to wrap round over the next few hours. And I imagine tonight will be very interesting to watch. I do suspect that we'll probably see a lot of action overnight.
Yeah. Some questions coming in right now about Houston, for example, as a location. What kind of impacts they might be seeing. It is notable right now for them that Houston is under a tropical storm warning. So you should be, if you're in the metro, like direct city, at least preparing for tropical storm conditions right there. A lot of the worst impacts will be quite track dependent, and they did specify in their forecast discussion that users, and I'm quoting this exactly, that users are reminded again to not focus on the exact details of the tracker intensity forecasts, as the average track error at hour 36 is around 60 miles, and the average intensity error is close to 10 miles per hour in terms of sustained wind intensity errors. In addition to that, wind, storm surge, and rainfall hazards will extend away from the center, so if you're in Houston, for example, don't pay attention to the exact cone right now. You're preparing as the warnings on top of you are stating right now, which is a tropical storm warning. Take the proper precautions. Listen to your local officials about what they want you to do to stay safe. They're obviously the ones that are going to know the best information about your exact location. Because again, we can talk about Houston as a city, but it is quite large. So your local weather office and local officials are going to have a lot on that. I think the other thing that's an important conversation point along with that, though, the storm surge graphic brings it up pretty well, but so does the actual area where warnings are in place. On top of that, is that the worst impacts from the system in terms of potential surge, and winds really are really lopsided off to the east of the center. They're expecting a much smaller area in comparison to the eastern side of potential more severe conditions.
Yep. Why are they called hot towers if they are the coldest cloud tops in the storm? That's a really good question.
Yeah. Why? I was thinking, why are they called hot towers?
They look hot.
Because they're not hot.
They are extremely cold.
Minus 90 degrees. I don't think you could put minus 90 degrees hot.
Oh, it depends who you ask.
There is hot ice, and that's just really cold, so...
I think by hot they mean figuratively intense.
We really need Devon on here. He'll probably know the answer. Neil says there is a center of spinning clouds over Jamaica. What is it? Let's see if we can just get that on the screen briefly. Can we see that area? There you can see the area around Jamaica on the left-hand side. Whatever it is, the frames are loading through. I don't think it's much. A new recon mission has taken off and is heading into Laura from Florida, we're informed.
That is correct, and I'm sure people here will be keeping us up to date on the recon data, but one is taking off from a bit northeast of Tampa right now. The latest update has it still over the Florida Peninsula, but about to head into the Gulf of Mexico.
This is a NOAA 2 plane that last time that they used it was a lower level drop zone plane. So it'll be interesting to see what this plane captures in a storm. And again, there's going to be another one that takes off too, an Air Force plane that takes off as well. I'm not too sure where it's going to take off from. I'm assuming from think the Carolinas, because that's where they took off last time. So there's also going to be that going taking off really shortly here too.
And plenty of flash flood watches are now in effect as well. And I gotta say, yeah, mainly for western Louisiana into far eastern Texas and into Arkansas. Just to point out as well, there are actually some flash flood warnings in central Mississippi as well. Is that associated with Laura?
Some of those flash flood warnings that are in place right now, I would presume based on the time
They're to do
frame
with
of them.
Marco.
Yeah, with the remnants of Marco, because even though the actual center and the core energy of it is just this low-level swirl of clouds that isn't producing anything just off the coast of southwestern Louisiana, where Laura can make landfall close to right now, the sheared off convective and thunderstorm activity way off to the north and east from Marco is still producing some heavier rainfall, which could be prompting some of those. But the watches will likely be in place for Laura for the time being.
Certainly. If you've got any comments, let's try that again. If you've got any comments or questions for us whilst we're on the air, start your message with Force 13 all in text. We're here to answer any and all questions as best we can. In the meantime, where should we go to next? We'll get recon information soon. Let's see if we can get some new model data now. And regrettably, you won't be able to see this, but I'm just taking a little look now. Unless Orlando has some news.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that the icon model is already initialized and has at least come out far enough to show at what point in their run that Laura will end up making landfall.
And when's that?
I'll give you an exact hour right now.
Okay. At some point. I'm just checking the... you can't discount the NAM 12 kilometer. The 3 kilometer, yeah, you can throw that one out the window, but the lesser resolution 12 kilometer is a lot more sensible, and it at the moment is calling for, looks like at least a category 2. I think we're pretty sure that it's going to get to category 2 status at this point. And I think a lot of people are pretty damn sure it will get to category 3. This actually, though, is pretty much taking it to Galveston, so that's interesting. And strengthening a little bit before.
So the hour is around between.
The forecast track has moved gradually west at the point where Texas is now in play a lot more. I think that first, in the early stages of Laura, when it had formed, having it sort of eastern Louisiana. But that has significantly moved further west now that it has cleared Cuba. It went south of Cuba.
Well,
so
you say that, but just recently it's been moving east of the National Hurricane Center's forecast, the last 6 hours. However, the first of the 18Z runs that are coming out now, the latest model runs, the NAM and the Icon, are west of the forecast track.
Yeah, a lot of the 18Z interpolated runs are a bit slightly west of the latest NHC cone. But, they did specifically note in their forecast discussion 2 things. One is that westward shifts could occur because of, them specifically noted the UK Met and the Euro. And secondly, people shouldn't be paying too specific attention if they're under a hurricane warning or even tropical storm warning to the exact landfall point shown on the cone, because the average error for track at around 36 hours, which is about where they're expecting the landfall point to be, is about 60 miles. So you could see a deviation 60 miles west or east at that point. That's going to have massive implications. So just because you aren't exactly on the landfall point, make sure you're preparing anyways, because of the threat that it can still pose despite that.
To go off of that, on the National Hurricane Center graphic itself, it says the cone contains the probable path of the storm center, but does not show the size of the storm. Hazardous conditions can occur outside the cone. That is a key thing to keep in mind here. Just because you're not in a cone at all here does not mean you can't see hazardous conditions and dangerous conditions from this hurricane as it makes landfall here. So that's a big thing to keep in mind here. I see a lot of people saying well, it wasn't in the cone, and so I didn't expect the storm to be as bad. National Hurricane Center always puts on the top of their graphics that hazardous conditions can occur outside of a cone. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at a forecast cone, especially this far out in advance here. Not this far out in advance, where it's a lot smaller than it would be if it was 5 days out in advance here. So that's a big thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, and it really goes to, not just the current hurricane warning zone, but also the current tropical storm wind force field being larger than the actual cone of uncertainty at hour 36. So it is a situation where just if you're not in the exact cone of uncertainty doesn't mean that you shouldn't be taking proper precautions because of, like Isaac said exactly, hazardous conditions can and will occur outside of that.
Again, you can see the 6-panel display. Well, it's supposed to be. Only 5 of them are working, actually. I'm up there on the top right-hand side. You can only ever see half of me. That's all right. But on the right-hand side, which is my left, which makes it even more confusing, is the latest imagery of Laura. You can also see Laura on the left-hand side of your screen there, but Bavi takes up the main panel simply because it's much larger, and you can see it there compared to the southern part of the Korean peninsula. That is a category 3 on our numbers, 115 miles per hour. JTWC slightly lower at 110. But you can see there it's going to pass fairly close to some of those islands. Typhoon force conditions are likely. And the question relating to Bavi there, does it have a chance to spawn tornadoes?
It's
The
Most storms
geography
do.
over in Korea isn't as conducive for tornadic development as in the US, but it's possible.
it isn't particularly likely, but again, if you're in South Korea or somehow in North Korea watching this, the odds of an isolated tornado risk are technically possible.
That's a little bit hopeful, Strat.
But except, it's better to be optimistic than pessimistic.
I mean, given that it's forecast to make landfall in North Korea, the terrain there is very mountainous, and tornadoes won't be able to form there, really.
Indeed. So there it is, a fairly large storm by West Pacific standards, about average, but a decent eye there. So borderline category 3 at least, and a deepening pressure gradient as well. Looking back to the Gulf of Mexico, our main feature is Laura, mainly because of time zones. Over in Asia, it's still quite early in the morning. Here is what should be a loop of Laura, and what's left of Marco, which you can see its ghost there, just off the coast of Louisiana. The image is loading very slowly. Once they've loaded, they'll play quickly. They do actually want us to talk more about Bavi, some of our viewers. I mean, I can tell you regarding Bavi, there are about 53 million people with a 10% chance of destructive winds, 60 miles an hour plus. For typhoon winds, I've forgotten the number now. I think it's something like 3 million with a 10% chance of typhoon equivalent hurricane force conditions. So I don't know. Any other questions about Bavi? We'll try and get some answers for that. In the meantime, this is Laura in the middle of the picture. Strat?
Yeah, I was just going to say, last note on Bavi is that even though the forecast track is west of where we were expecting it to potentially be 3 days ago, that, Seoul is still expecting gale force sustained winds from the system right now. So just because it's forecast to not make a landfall in South Korea doesn't mean that the risks associated with the storm aren't there.
Yeah. Interestingly, a lot of people are talking about the extratropical storm that's affecting Europe at the moment in our comments section as well, which is interesting. That's where I am, and we had a little bit of wind earlier on, about 35 mile an hour gusts roughly. Been very wet, not too bad. Nothing compared to what we're looking at on the screen, which is a dysfunctional screen by the looks of things, because for some reason it stopped playing images. Let's go back to the rapid scan. Well, there's two there. That's the infrared. You can see there it's still not fully all together, but it is getting closer. The visible obviously always looks better. However, look at that. That is always a sign of strengthening there. You look at this imagery here and you can see two convective blow-ups occurring up opposite sides of the eye. You seen that?
Definitely not good news there. That's a sign of perhaps things to come here.
That's absolutely a sign of intensification right there.
Yeah, and I imagine that's probably going to pick up as we head into the evening hours of the daytime here. That's going to pick up and probably try to wrap itself more around the center. So not really good information there. And this goes to show that people, if anybody was delaying trying to evacuate from the coastline, you need to do it ASAP. Especially if you're under mandatory evacuations, you should be evacuating ASAP as soon as possible. They have many ways you can get out of the city. There's the cities and counties that they have mandatory evacuations up for. They have that all ready to go for you. You just got to look online and find them, and find those buses and ways of transportation to get out of the area so you can protect your own life from this storm. They have all that, again, ready and at your disposal. And in fact, I want to see if I could pull up the mandatory evacuations again, so I could go over them for people who maybe just joined the stream here within the hour. And according to Governor Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas here, this is as of about 5 hours ago, give or take, a member here, he states that local mandatory evacuations are in effect for Jefferson County, Texas, Orange County, Texas, the city of Galveston, Texas, and the city of Port Arthur, Texas. He also states local voluntary evacuations are in effect for the following areas: Chambers County, Texas, city of Nassau Bay, Texas, and the city of Seabrook, Texas. And again, those are local mandatory and voluntary evacuations as of about 5 hours ago, according to Governor Greg Abbott from Texas here. And I imagine the list is going to expand here over time as the storm gets closer to the Texas coastline.
All right. Send your questions in. Start your message with Force 13 all in text, and we'll get answers for you. But in the meantime, we are looking at the latest rapid scan visible imagery of Hurricane Laura. To recap the watches and warnings that are currently in effect, a storm surge warning is in effect from San Luis Pass, Texas to the mouth of the Mississippi River. Hurricane warning for San Luis Pass again to Intracoastal City, Louisiana. A tropical storm warning for Sargent, Texas to San Luis Pass, east of Intracoastal City to the mouth of the Mississippi River. A storm surge watch for Freeport, Texas to San Luis Pass, the mouth of the Mississippi River to Ocean Springs, Mississippi, Lake Pontchartrain, Lake Maurepas, and Lake Bourne. A hurricane watch for east of Intracoastal City to the west of Morgan City, Louisiana there. Regarding the expectations again, with regards storm surge, the water could reach the following heights above ground somewhere in the indicated areas if the peak surge occurs at the time of high tide. Sea Rim State Park, Texas to Intracoastal City, Louisiana, 9 to 13 feet. Intracoastal City to Morgan City, 7 to 11. Port Bolivar, Texas to Sea Rim State Park, 6 to 9 feet. Morgan City to the mouth of the Mississippi River, 4 to 6 feet. San Luis Pass to Port Bolivar, 3 to 5 feet. Galveston Bay, also 3 to 5 feet. Freeport, Texas to San Luis Pass, 2 to 4 feet. The mouth of the Mississippi to Ocean Springs, including Lake Bourne, 2 to 4 feet. And Lake Pontchartrain and Lake Maurepas, also at 2 to 4 feet. That's the storm surge expectations. The rainfall from Wednesday afternoon through Friday, Laura is expected to produce rainfall totals of 5 to 10 inches with isolated maximums of 15 across portions of the northwestern Gulf Coast from western Louisiana to far eastern Texas and northward into much of Arkansas. Over the lower to middle Mississippi Valley from central Louisiana into western Tennessee and Kentucky and southeastern Missouri, 2 to 4 inches of rainfall with isolated totals of 6 are expected as well. and this rainfall will cause widespread flash and urban flooding, small streams to overflow their banks, and minor to isolated moderate river flooding. So certainly looks like it's going to be a flood risk beyond this potential major hurricane landfall.
Yep. And good evening. I've just joined the chat, joined the stream here, and I wanted to come in and say...
Yes, good evening, Samuel.
Yes, joining in from Chicago, and it looks like the U.S. is not really going to be... has not had much of a break lately due to the ongoing severe weather threat in the Midwest and Northeast as well. So looks like we'll be dealing with a dual threat between Hurricane Laura in the south and the severe weather threat in the Northeast, which could be enhanced by the remnants of Laura as the storm moves quickly through the eastern United States.
Yep, let's get some questions then. Could this be like Michael and be a Category 5? It's not October.
And also, it's not coming from a Central American gyre.
Yeah, I think the
Not
second
hitting
thing
Florida
too.
either.
Yeah, further on top of that too is the intensity guidance overall. The peak intensities have backed off a bit, although it's still expected to be a major hurricane at landfall right now. The only thing really hindering it in the next 24 hours would be potential dry air entrailment or other structural troubles that the system may have. But the last 6 to 12 hours to landfall, which is where Michael of 2018, of course, managed to become a Category 5. This storm is going to be facing an area of higher wind shear, which is going to mean that it's either going to slow its intensification down, which the National Hurricane Center indicated in their forecast discussion, or it may even halt intensification if the structure manages to get too disrupted by it. So conditions in the very last approach to landfall will be less favorable than those in the next 24 hours. You're not going to see a system, in all likelihood, that tries to rapidly intensify in spite of higher wind shear that it will be encountering close to its closest approach to land. That doesn't mean that people that are under hurricane warnings right now, for example, should not be preparing as if this may be a stronger storm, though, because those precautionary measures are always better to take ahead of time than to see something unexpected happen and just be stuck in it, not properly prepared.
Could Laura become an annular tropical cyclone?
Well, as far as records go in the satellite era, we haven't seen one in the Gulf of Mexico ever. An annular hurricane. An annular hurricane can develop anywhere else, really, and it makes it much more resilient against unfavorable conditions, and it means it can hold its intensity for much longer. But that looks really unlikely at the moment.
Doesn't look like that's going to happen. Will Laura make landfall at peak intensity? Personally, I think there could be a little bit of weakening before landfall. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it looks like there's probably going to be a little bit of, it's got probably about 24 hours or so to really intensify.
I mean, it is rare that a storm makes landfall on the northern shores of the Gulf at peak intensity.
Well, it has happened a lot in the past few years. Harvey, Michael, Barry, and probably a few others.
Well, okay, Barry, yeah, but I'm talking about majors here.
Majors.
You know, you've got plenty of storms that haven't done so. Rita, Ivan, Dennis, Gustav, Ike, Katrina,
even.
All these storms weren't at peak intensity at landfalls. Usually that's how it goes. Sometimes, though, we get peak intensity at landfall.
Like Hurricane Michael.
All these storms did weaken after peak intensity at landfall, but they all did cause very significant damage. And it just shows that even if it's not at peak when it makes landfall, it still caused the same amount of damage as if it did make landfall at peak because of storm surge and rainfall and many other factors.
Sure. Would additional rapid intensification drive the storm further west?
Typically, that drive it further east because it allow itself to fight a bit better against the ridge that's currently the dominant steering factor for it. So if it, for some reason, say in the next 12 hours, went from its 80 miles an hour to 150 miles an hour, which of course isn't forecast by anything, and that won't happen. But if that hypothetical were to occur and you had a 150-mile-an-hour storm in this specific spot, it'd be able to fight back better against that ridge and would probably move further east than indications would have for a storm that's currently 80 miles an hour in the same position.
And you can see this long-running loop here that's must be about 12 hours long. And you can see how the storms progress throughout the day. It's really improved in its appearance from a borderline hurricane to maybe 80 to 85 mile an hour category 1 and getting stronger at this point.
I mean, we have those recon aircraft heading into the storm right now. I'm sure people will definitely be keeping an eye on that.
How long's that off?
I think Isaac's going to be able to share those as soon as they come in to the storm. The latest update... Oh, go for it.
Probably about an hour or so, I want to say, because the NOAA plane is taking off from Florida, and then the Air Force plane is going to be taking off, I believe, from South Carolina. So I think the NOAA plane might be there within an hour and a half or so, depending on how fast they're flying. I think, perhaps.
All right.
I wanted, if you guys don't mind, I found a updated list of evacuation orders. If you mind me discussing that really quickly here.
Sure.
Here's a updated list of evacuation orders. I have it on my screen here. There's mandatory evacuations in effect for the city of Galveston, Texas, Hardin County, Texas, Jasper County, Texas, Jefferson County, Texas, Newton County, Texas, Orange County, Texas, and also the city of Port Arthur. And those are, again, mandatory evacuations in effect as of the updated list as of 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. Voluntary evacuations are in effect for the city of Baytown, zip code specific between 77520 and 707523 for vulnerable populations in low-lying areas. The Bolivar Peninsula, Brazoria County, Chambers County, Texas, Harris County, Texas in zones A and B, Jamaica Beach, the city of Jamaica Beach, Texas, city of Nassau Bay, Texas, the city of Seabrook, Texas, and the city of Tiki Island, Texas, and those are voluntary evacuations in effect for those parts of Texas. And then there's also locations for reception centers for evacuees, and they have all that information as well given to you. And this is by the Texas Hurricane Center by the Texas government here.
So there we have it. That's the latest in terms of evacuation procedures, and hopefully everyone follows that information, especially if they're particularly vulnerable to the storm in one way or another. We're going to take a short break here. We'll be back in just a moment to talk more about Laura and Typhoon Bavi. Force 13 Live coverage continues on Hurricane Laura and Typhoon Bavi. Laura is still very much the main subject that we're talking about this evening, as it does appear to be intensifying. And again, you look at the visible imagery there, you can see hot towers on either side of what would be apparently the storm's eye. And so intensification looks to be ongoing or imminent, maybe rapid intensification at a worst case. And again, my team are here to tell us more about all of this. Recon data on the way, GFS model run data won't be too far off. National Hurricane Center's next update will be at 7 p.m. Central Time, assuming that they don't do any update statements. So a reiteration of where Laura is right now. It's at 24.7 north, 88.3 degrees west. That is 480 miles southeast of Lake Charles, 510 southeast of Galveston, and it's got winds of 80 miles an hour, moving west-northwest at 17 miles per hour, and the central pressure 990. Strat.
A question in chat really quick, because I know there's always people coming in and out, again, about the forecast intensity for the system, what exactly it could do. I think it's always important to reiterate, and it's said specifically by a lot of officials, of course, that this is forecasting a major hurricane at landfall right now, Category 3, but people in a hurricane warning zone should be preparing for impacts above that. It's always better to over-prepare than under-prepare. And also because the average track error is about 60 miles at the 36-hour point. So that kind of deviation will have significant impacts in terms of which locations gain the exact worst wind speeds when this thing comes ashore. So stay up to date regarding those. In terms of questions on whether or not it can become a Category 4, based on the increasing shear in the last 6 to 12 hours to landfall and the intensity guidance kind of backing off a bit, at least the interpolated model runs, where it's going to be interesting to see what the full-on model runs say when they come out. It's not the consensus forecast right now, but it technically isn't impossible either, and people along the northwestern Gulf Coast should be preparing for that occurrence, even if it doesn't end up occurring.
Again, we're looking at the National Hurricane Center's forecast track here on the screen on the left-hand side, and the expected potential surge, peak storm surge, still an experimental graphic from the National Hurricane Center there, and you can see the areas that are most at risk. Could this be like Lily, is a question that we've received. And no takers on that one.
Well, Lily dissipated before the Gulf, really. That doesn't look, there is no indication that that's going to do that. But similar track, yes. It was in a different month, and it looks like it could be a tad stronger.
Yeah, the Lily's track analog is probably one of the better ones available in terms of moving mostly south of Cuba and then clipping the very western coast of Cuba before moving into the Gulf of Mexico. The difference really is that Lily weakened a lot more before landfall. The expectations are that right now, Laura will still be a stronger system than Lily was at landfall, even if it has some slight weakening at the last moment due to higher wind shear that it's expected to encounter close to the coastline. So track isn't the worst analog, but intensity is going to be a bit of a different one in relations. And, I guess one of the larger differences that we're also going to see, is people have been asking about this as well, is its potential move across much of the eastern United States and still flash flooding threat well inland away from where you'd normally expect. 2 to 4 inches of rainfall and associated with the system are expected within the next 5 days, all the way up into Pennsylvania right now in association with the storm. So flash flooding and general local flooding risks are definitely there with this system very far inland, and even out towards the eastern seaboard, where a wider area of 1 to 2 inches is possible as the storm exits along the mid-Atlantic coast and as a post-tropical cyclone.
Convective activity looking interesting on the infrared. You can see towards the later part of that frame there, massive blow-ups there in the last few minutes on the eastern side of the storm's eye. And again, you've got that western side coming in there as well. Still, northern side looks, well, the area that's bare is decreasing. And you can see here it's pushing the reds around the bottom, the south and the southeastern side of the storm. Still about half and half on that. The eye's obviously in there somewhere as well. And the main question really is what's going on with the eye structure right now, I suppose, because if the eye structure, it completes its inner eye wall, then, it's already halfway there. But just looking again at that imagery there, mesmerizing at times.
Someone's asking, what is a hot tower, Nathan? So not like why it's called that, but what are they?
Usually it's a rather isolated and very, well, tall, to put it into non-descriptive words, that you often get in tropical cyclones and even not very well developed ones. Usually you have a central point or one or two little points where the cloud tops are much higher than the surrounding ones. For instance, what you've got on the screen right now are two hot towers. The one on the right hand side is probably about maybe trying to figure this one out, maybe 6 to 10 Celsius cooler, and that it's measuring the temperature of the satellite, the infrared satellite is, but really what we're interested in, the lower temperature obviously means that the cloud is higher up in the atmosphere, so that means that the hot tower is much higher up than the rest of the area. Usually it's a very small area that has that, and as you can see here, it's a sure sign of strengthening usually.
For the most part, it's going to be really interesting to see how the storm progresses overnight here. If it closes off that eye quickly, or if it takes a little while for it to do so.
How much wind shear is in the Gulf right now?
Well, to my understanding, pretty much no wind shear at all, unless you get to the coastline of Texas.
Yeah. Right now, like
great.
Isaac said, it doesn't have almost any wind shear at all. It's extremely minimal. The largest thing that might slow down intensification is going to be any potential dry air entrailment or just general troubles that the storm may have with its structure. In about 30 to 36 hours, though, right before landfall, it may, and is forecast right now, to increase it's forecast that between hours 24 and 36, wind shear will increase over the system as it makes its final approach to the coastline. So that may hinder intensification somewhat, or even potentially cause it to weaken very slightly before landfall, although the expectations right now is that it'll just slow down intensification, not actually induce any weakening for the time being.
And looking at some more imagery that I think is provided by Isaac here, another look at the visible throughout the day so far. That looks like it's not...
This is off of Go 16. This is the CONUS imagery. So the imagery updates every 5 minutes to get a little bit longer range of time to be able to see how the storm's been doing here. And like you said earlier, Nathan, you can see the convection bubbling around the center of circulation there, especially in the last few frames there.
Those last frames.
Just look at that. That's just it's absolutely incredible how we could get high resolution imagery near real time from these satellites here in orbit in our skies now. It's incredible. I remember tracking storms back when we had Ghost 13 and you had to wait 15-30 minutes to get a decent image off of that satellite. But with this one, you don't have to wait that much at all with this one. You can get pretty visible views like this one and the ones that
every
you're
couple
right
of
now.
minutes on the rapid scan.
The rapid scan actually can go up to 30 seconds in special events like Hurricane Michael and other storms too. So one image every 30 seconds, it just boggles my mind how...
Well, what I always wonder is why don't they just get a video camera up there and stream it?
It'll probably take a little while to to send the data, the high resolution data down back to Earth, I would imagine, or just text the limits.
But one image, the full GOES 16 image, they beam it down to Earth every 10 minutes, the full disc, right? And that's about a quarter of a gigabyte every 10 minutes. That's only on one channel.
Yeah, full disk imagery is every 10 minutes. CONUS imagery is about every 5 minutes. Mesoscale varies between 1 minute and then 30 seconds on special events like Hurricane Michael and Irma and other major hurricanes in the past.
Okay, well, we'll not go any further on that one. Do we think that Laura will be a major hurricane as the National Hurricane Center and many models show, or peak as a Category 2 like many of the other models show? Well, National Hurricane Center are calling for Category 3. and I think that's reasonable. It would be at least 115 miles per hour at landfall. Not much more can be said, really. That's what late Wednesday, overnight Wednesday into Thursday.
Yeah,
Nelson just sent us some information in the chat here, and I appreciate you, Nelson, for giving this to us. He says Calceu has issued a mandatory evacuation. Cameron County and I'm assuming Louisiana has issued a mandatory evacuation. Alan Paris has issued a voluntary evacuation. Beauregard Parish has issued a voluntary evacuation.
Wow.
And Jeff Davis County has issued a voluntary evacuation, according to Nelson here on chat here. And I really appreciate you for updating us on evacuation orders there in Louisiana.
And here again is another look at the infrared imagery on the storm. Gotta say, the northwestern side looking flakier on that latest imagery, but I do think it will only be temporary.
Yeah, the most likely outcome right now is that this bubbling up of stronger convection on the southeastern half really is going to end up wrapping around and becoming the new dominant force over on that side. But at least temporary waning for the time being, somewhat. But still, we're going to have a new recon plane actually take a pass from the northeast to southwest, probably within the next hour or so. It's actually reaching the outer periphery of the system right now. The latest update as of 21:45 UTC, so as of 2 minutes ago, is that it is really at the northeastern tip of the storm. So we'll get a pass soon enough, so stay tuned for that and the latest recon data.
Michael something asks, what's the last time the Gulf has seen such a big threat? And I'm very disappointed with a name like Michael that you would ask that question. Surely that would be the answer, right?
Well, that's
Yeah,
the
I think
right
so.
answer.
Yep.
Yeah,
Michael
I mean, if they say
2018.
major,
So do we know anything about Recon's plan then now?
I'd like to just mention that in regards to Recon, there might be a little issue with it.
Oh no.
I was looking at the flight level winds are coming in, the data's coming in perfectly fine, but the pressure has been absent for a good little while now, which is
So
might
this
be a
time they
little
might not
problematic.
get pressure readings.
If it's not corrected, they might not be able to get a pressure reading, but they will definitely get a wind test.
And again, there's going to be another reconnaissance plane heading off from, I believe, South Carolina a little bit here. It should have left about an hour ago. If I'm assuming they're maybe trying to sort out some technical difficulties there on their part, and that's going to be flying as well soon into the storm.
there's been some notorious levels of technical difficulties with the recon aircrafts today so far. You have the potential pressure issues with the one going into the storm right now, potential technical difficulties with the plane further up in South Carolina. This morning, one of the planes didn't give any data for over 2 hours and had another cutoff after that as well. Of course, we have planes in the storm that are giving us some information, but in terms of the cutoffs and technical difficulties, they've been quite numerous today.
Interesting. There was a comment there that said the airplane is flying too high to extrapolate pressure. Do you think that might be the case?
I would have to check the flight level, but that's possible.
Yeah, I mean, it currently is flying around 6,600 or so meters above sea level.
That's quite high.
So they'll of course take a decline when they get really into the storm. But for now, they're a bit far up. So that could be it, and it's hopefully nothing actually too significant compared to some of the errors that we were seeing ongoing this morning.
Indeed. Well, you can, of course, continue the conversation even when we're off the air later tonight by joining our Discord server, where we've got our ever so vibrant community right now. A lot of people chatting in there at the moment. And I believe it's about to reach 1,000 members. Actually, that did happen, so there we go. So there's plenty of people to chat to there, if that takes your fancy. At all hours. In the meantime, we will be staying live here until the end of the next hour, which is, I'm already losing track of time here. That would be 6 p.m. Eastern or Central.
6
Central
p.m.
time.
Central.
6 p.m. Central. We got there in the end. So that's when we'll be finishing up here or handing off if Strat's doing more coverage. I don't know. Are you?
I'm actually not available later tonight
Well, there you
for
go then.
live discussion, but we do have 2 automated streams up on the US channel, or not
And there'll be
US
more
channel, the main channel
videos
right
as
now.
well, of course. Video
So-
update.
We have the 24/7 live hurricane tracker, which is always available right now, and a specific floater for Typhoon Bavi on the main channel. And on the Force 13 US, if people want to search that up, we also have a live floater for Laura right now specifically as well. So when we go off the air for commentary, we're still going to be providing coverage in a plethora of different ways.
A plethora, he says. Let's see now. Is Laura passing over the loop current? Is a question that we've received.
Let me check, because I think it might be moving a bit past that now.
Yeah, I think its outer fringes at best might be over it. I don't think it's over it anymore.
It's definitely moved a bit to the west of it at this point. It may be on the very edge of some of the western area of influence of it. But overall, the core center of the system is west of that now. Some of the eastern convective bands are still a bit over it, but that won't be lasting for anything more than a few more hours.
And again, we're looking on the infrared imagery, the sandwich imagery here. Yeah, not fully organized, it would appear. I'm just getting my thoughts together as I look at this myself. Certainly you can see that weakness on the western side, very much weak there. You can really see that on the imagery. That is probably the weakest point of the storm. Also, there might be a break up there towards the north as well, right there. There could be a little bit of a break there. So I think definitely this is still a ragged eye, if you're going to describe it that way. It's not well defined, and it's not a full eye wall by some distance, I would imagine, based on the infrared imagery.
Yeah, I'm interested, Isaac. I don't know if you can pull up any microwave imagery over the storm right now to see if we've seen any recent microwave passes,
Can do
though,
that.
to get the best view possible, the eye structure.
I'll get on that in a second here if I can. Be back with you on that.
Let's see if there's any more questions in the meantime. What's the loop range?
Typically, and I actually linked a EDU paper from University of Miami if people want to take a look at that in particular. It's a little loop, kind of a bulge out from the very far southeastern Gulf of Mexico that goes about up to 25 degrees north and about 87 or to 88 degrees west at its furthest extent, really. And then it kind of curves off, goes in between the Florida Strait and back out and just becomes the Gulf Stream. So that's a little area where you may be seeing some warmer sea surface temperatures than usual, just from parts of the current associated with them. Much larger, underwater currents that are ongoing around the world.
Isaac, talk us through this imagery then.
Well, I was only able to put this up really quickly. This is outdated by about 6-7 hours here,
Oh, wow.
so this could have changed a lot here. You can see on the last few frames there, it's the beginnings of an eye wall and microwave imagery. I'll try to get a later frame to you when I can, but this is just a loop off of Sims here over the past 24 hours, showing just the general structure of the storm, how it's been progressing over the past 24 hours worth of time here.
Well, there you have it. So that is how it looks on the microwave, or how it did look at some point. In the meantime, let's see. Yes, a question about what is the current number on the CDPS for the storm. I think Devon earlier had it as a 6, is that right?
It was a 6 as of the 2 p.m. update. That was anticipating slightly lower rainfall totals as a maximum, though. So it may be changed slightly, but if it's
Stage
up a
6
little bit
is
more,
pretty bad.
it's still in one of the I think it's still the top 30 percentile of all landfalling storms in the Atlantic Basin. If it makes landfall as a stage 6, which is based on the current data, what would occur if it was perfect. So definitely something to keep in mind, that this would be one of the higher tier landfalling storms if it makes landfall as a Category 3 and brings up to 10 inches of rainfall with it.
Isaac,
And,
what do you think of the structure looking at that satellite imagery? Oh, is he gone? Well, how about you, Ryan?
I accidentally muted myself. I found out, so I'm not muted anymore. Sorry about that. But I think the northern side, convective-wise, it looks like it seems to be the weaker side of it. Of course, Recon is going to go in there really shortly here and determine whether or not that's true or not. If the southern side is actually getting stronger out of the northern side, they'll find that out. But I'm assuming overnight here, that southern big kind of blob, I guess you could say, of deep convection is going to try to wrap around the northern side. And if it does, it may try to consolidate into a decently clear and well-defined eye there, I would imagine, if it does get wrap around the other side.
So that's what we're really looking for potential rapid intensification in the overnight hours into tomorrow, really.
And it looks like it will be in the overnight hours. It's not going to be just now.
Yeah, so, I mean, if this starts to really ramp up overnight while a lot of us are asleep and some of you are awake and want to keep an eye on it, the Force 13 US channel does have that floater stream available, of course.
Oh, Strat loves plugging it. Well, we'll be back in a few moments' time. We'll have another hour of coverage on Laura and a little bit of Bavi as well. Stay tuned. We'll have the latest from Recon as well. Live coverage will continue in a moment. During this major worldwide tropical cyclone event, the Force 13 US channel will be showcasing live satellite and radar imagery of Hurricane Laura. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Third hour of tonight's coverage on Hurricane Laura, with a bit of Typhoon Bavi as well, both two very dangerous tropical cyclones. that will be affecting either sides of the world in the next 48 to 72 hours. Main focus is on Laura. Hurricane and storm surge warnings are in effect for parts of Texas and Louisiana. My name's Nathan Foy. I'm joined by our team as ever, a revolving team actually, in this hour consisting of Isaac, Kay, Ryan, Nelson, Samuel, and Euxineda. Good evening to you all.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Let's begin then with Nelson, because you're in Louisiana and you may have some information for us. I know you've been relaying a bunch of things over, but tell us what's going on at your place.
Well, at my place right now, it's actually a fairly pleasant day in the 90s and sunny. We have had a lot of wind today, which is actually fairly rare for a time when there isn't any convection around the area. It would not be associated with the remnants of Marco at this time, but we have recorded a pressure drop at my house down below 1012 millibars, which is not what we got as the center of circulation of Marco passed around my house yesterday. So the pressure actually continues to drop here in New Orleans, and people in the area are cautiously optimistic that the city itself will escape. Obviously, we have concern for our fellow Louisianans and Texans on the west side of the state. But beyond that, there is not much to report. Isaac has read off the evacuations of certain Louisiana parishes, both mandatory and voluntary. And just one note that I would like to make: Port Arthur on the Louisiana-Texas border right there is home to the Motiva refinery, which is the largest refinery in North America. So regardless of how that facility itself is affected, the ability to deliver oil and refined oil across the U.S. may be significantly delayed in the coming days, resulting in a price spike.
Well, that ain't going to be good. But Nelson, regarding the storm itself, you've been tracking, or you've seen tropical cyclones for quite a few years by this point. Does it remind you of anything here?
I could say that it's, these early stages are reminiscent of things like Gustav, Hurricane Rita. They can be off by a few miles and off in presentation by a little bit, but when you just see it blow up, and you can see that it is going to, and you can hope against hope, but those are the storms that come to mind because of the way they present themselves as they go through their lifetime.
Now, I think Strat's got busy elsewhere because a poll has just been posted on our channel. It wasn't me. It must have been Strat because he just left us a moment ago. So you might be interested in taking that on our channel community page as well. So there we have it. This is Laura right now. Hurricane warnings are in effect for this storm, which could deliver 13 feet of storm surge in western Louisiana. And hate to bring you back on this, Nelson, but 13 feet in those areas, what would you expect to see?
That kind of depth of storm surge, obviously dependent on the coincidence of the tides, but that area is low-lying. The coast of Louisiana is very marshy, very swampy, and I mean the highest point in the state is only 530 some feet above sea level. So as you're going to be seeing the image shift towards the experimental storm surge map, that only shows you on Lake Calcasieu and near the Sabine Pass there on the Texas-Louisiana border, how high it'll get. Now, I've seen the other storm surge graphics presented on the stream showing how far inland they can go, and that's up to 30 miles. So storm surge is going to be a very big deal, and in line with that, the city of Lake Charles, which is at the top of Lake Calcasieu, which is the second blob to the right of the Louisiana-Texas border right there, has already issued a boil water advisory. They already anticipate that their systems will not be able to provide clean water to the residents, and so they are issuing the boil water advisory. Anything you get out the taps needs to be boiled for at least a minute before consumed, or used even externally.
Gee. Kay, you've also just joined us this hour, and we're also tracking the storm here. Rainfall expectations are going to be pretty high, and it could maintain hurricane status quite far inland, according to the National Hurricane Center's cone.
Well, and indeed, according to models, there was a very notable HWRF run that I was following the other day, where it made landfall as a very strong system in the 930s, and it was still a hurricane heading into Arkansas, and a tropical storm into Missouri.
You can see it almost there on the National Hurricane Center cone. That would be a pretty big deal as well. Certainly flash flood watches have already been put in place in some of those areas. And if I'm not mistaken, is it West Virginia that currently have some flash flood warnings now? So that can't be a good situation that this storm's moving through. I imagine they must be pretty flood prone at the moment.
Yes, some of that's probably started by Isaias over in West Virginia, and it seems that the rain hasn't let up since then. So it'd be unfortunate if Laura managed to get all the way across there and exacerbate the current conditions.
Okay, some more questions here then. Will Laura affect Mississippi? On the whole, not much, although a shift east would make that bit different.
Minor surge impacts, a bit of rainfall, more so in the north of the state as Laura moves past that part of the country.
That's the second time that's happened on here. In the first hour, Euxinada and some of the viewers pulled you up on that. You called Louisiana a country, which was rather interesting. Certainly not. Also, Laura continues to appear to move east more towards me. Please clarify, says Hurricane 7. Well, it's moved slightly east of the previous National Hurricane Center cone, but 18Z models, which are coming out right now, look to be shifting west again. Let's see if we've now got GFS, actually, because that information should be out here. And it isn't. That's strange. So that didn't go as well as we... Oh, no, there it is. Okay, the GFS is out, and it is pretty much going with exactly the National Hurricane Center forecast, calling for a landfall 964 millibars. So that must be a borderline Category 3, yeah?
960.
964 there, after a peak of 961. So they've had a few runs in the 950s, and now it's 961, so... The general trend on these new model runs is that it's slightly weaker, but pretty much exactly following National Hurricane Center cone or slightly west.
Of course, I'll have to look at why it's weaker, because besides the statistics, I'm not getting anything else on my end at the moment.
I have models on my screen right now, GFS, and 964 in the latest 18Z run off this.
There it is at landfall. So the timing of that, when is that? 36 hours from the run time, so evening hours of the 25th, is it? No, that's the initialization. The 27 early on the 27th. There it is.
6 UTC on the 27th.
Yeah, so in line really with what National Hurricane Center is calling for.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that it's going to make landfall during the night here, when pretty much the worst time a hurricane can make a landfall at is during the night. When the power goes out, you can't see anything, but except maybe if you have a flashlight, that's pretty much all you can see is this your flashlight beam reflecting off those winds. I'm certain it's going to be a really scary night for a lot of people here along the Texas-Louisiana border here if this forecast verifies.
And we'll be here all through that, of course, on that one as well. Just seeing if the GFS is developing anything else. We did hear rumbles that there could be a little disturbance that forms near Central America and becomes a brief tropical cyclone in the Gulf of Mexico. Doesn't look like that's on the cards. And then after that, in about 4 or 5 days' time, we're looking at a potential another tropical wave that could develop into a cyclone as well. So something else to watch out for after Laura is gone.
Here's the NAM 12 kilometer here, and it has it making a 964. Looks like a 964 landfall around 9 UTC on the 27th, so a little bit later than the GFS. So something interesting there, and it has it making landfall just to the east of downtown Houston there.
Yeah, that won't be a good day.
No, it wouldn't. Pretty much, kind of like an Ike type track, as Ike missed downtown Louisiana. The eye itself, missed downtown Louisiana. I mean not Louisiana. Oh my goodness.
Downtown Houston.
Houston.
Is it a country or a city?
Well, I guess it's a country now because everybody keeps saying Louisiana's a country now.
Oh dear, where is this going?
Blooper reel. But yeah, Ike missed downtown Houston, the eye itself, just by barely a little bit here. So that's what the NAM 12 kilometer here is suggesting in this run. And I don't know if the other models have come out just yet, but that's how it is so far here for the models. All
right. We're back again with the rapid scan visible imagery of Hurricane Laura. If you've just joined us, it has winds of, did they keep, 80 miles an hour sustained winds. That's 130 kilometers per hour, moving west-northwest at 17. Minimum central pressure right now is 990 millibars. And again, on my screen, I'm always looking at the storm on the infrared view as well, the sandwich imagery. Not much to point out really, just that again, the biggest cloud tops there are still wrapping around and sort of curving over the center of the eye there in the latest frames. And actually, that's just a short spurt really. What we did see briefly was hot towers there on either side of the eye. The western one has stopped, and it's just the eastern one that's still persisting at the moment. So this intensification, if it is at all right now, is going to be rather slow, at least at first.
It's definitely going to take a little while for it to get going here.
Keep sending in your questions though. Start your message with Force 13 all in text. Why doesn't Hurricane Laura have an eye? It does. It's just hidden at the moment.
Yeah, it's not well defined. It's covered by all those cloud tops bubbling around the center of circulation there.
Could Laura undergo an eye wall replacement cycle? It doesn't have an eye wall to begin with at the minute, so...
Yeah. I don't think it could do that if it doesn't really have one well-developed one.
A little way down
quite
the line.
Yet.
Could this storm stall, or will this move quickly?
It's going to be a fairly quick-moving storm for the most part. It's not going to stay around like Allison and that H-named storm in 2017. It's not going to do that. It's going to be moving at a pretty brisk pace, I would imagine. So no, it's not really going to be a major flooding threat like that H-named storm in Allison was in 2001. For the most part here, it's mostly going to be a storm surge threat, and depending on how strong it gets, a wind threat.
Your area, obviously, in Texas, Isaac, and I imagine you've been up to speed with what local people might be thinking about the storm. Don't tell me there is every comparison under the sun to Harvey down there.
Unfortunately, there is. A lot of people are saying this is going to be a Harvey when Harvey was completely different animal, completely different storm. If anything, I would say in terms of if the forecast, if the NAM and the GFS are to be believed, I think maybe an Ike type track into Texas may be possible. If anything, not a Harvey. Harvey, remember, made landfall to my north. I'm in Oasis County, made landfall to my north as a Cat 4, then kind of meandered around inland Texas, went back out, and then slowly moved back into the Gulf of Mexico before hitting Louisiana as a tropical storm and giving Houston really bad record-setting flooding there. And this does not seem to be poised to do that at this point in time. It's supposed to be a fairly fast-moving storm for the most part.
More questions then here regarding the chances of it becoming a Category 4. I think people have mixed thoughts about that, although I think most of the community are supporting it.
I think personally it really depends on these next few overnight here, really, if it decides to pop out that eye quickly or if it takes a while to do so. Right now it looks like it's going to take a little while for it to do so.
You know what?
But,
I just wonder if it's going to be a bit like Isaias, where it won't make its mind up until the last sprint there. And maybe there'll be some rapid intensification as people land. I don't know.
It could very well do, because I mean the coastline kind of favors for it to intensify a little bit there, except with of course the addition of perhaps some increased winds here along the coast when it makes landfall. So that's going to be interesting to see. But I think really it depends overnight what the storm decides to do structurally here, whether it decides to pop out that eye fast or if it takes a little while to do that.
Yeah, currently Laura is over 85 to 87 degree waters, right smack in the open Gulf, which should with minimal shear, it should be allowed to intensify quite rapidly within the next 24 hours. Whether or not it'll continue to intensify up to landfall depends on how much shear is ahead of it. And again, they do not typically intensify all the way up to landfall in the Gulf. Michael obviously being an exception, but in the Northwest Gulf, that is much more rare.
It definitely is. Which is more likely, a Texas or Louisiana landfall?
Honestly, 50-50 pretty much.
Ryan thinks 50-50. It's near that.
I would tend to agree with them based on the forecast and model tracks, maybe a little bit skewed towards the Texas side, just in terms of where the models are. But I do want to address something real quickly. People in the chats like to ask, well, is it going to hit Houston, or is it going to hit this city or make landfall at this city? And while that may have some impact on reacting to the maximum winds and the maximum damages, I'm looking at the recon flight that is currently going into Laura right now, and I found the earliest measurement of tropical storm wind speeds. Now again, the aircraft is flying at a altitude of about 20,000 feet right now, but it's not yet turned in to make a center pass. However, even with that, in the northeastern quadrant, the tropical storm wind speeds start at 172 nautical miles from the center of the storm, which, if you convert that to statute miles, is 200 miles. So 200 miles away from the center, the point that everybody thinks about in terms of landfall and impact, you're still getting tropical storm force wind speeds, which are enough to create storm surge, put out power, do damage to limbs and small trees, which then can damage other structures. So again, the insistence on knowing the exact point misses the mark that the NHC has made clear in their key messages, that does not matter as much as the extent of the storm, which again, right now, 200 miles to the northeast, there are tropical storm force winds, and those will get to the coast long before the storm does.
Absolutely. In this case, several hours indeed. Let's see if there's some more questions then. Can Marco's cold trail halt its intensification a bit? Well, no, not really, because as far as I can see now, Laura is almost out of the trail that Marco left. And it's not much of a trail, it's just decreased the temperatures from 31 degrees to 29. So it's still very warm and will increase in the next 24 hours. So Laura's got a very big chance of intensification overnight tonight into tomorrow. Any more recon data then? I assume there wasn't when you were reading that out.
Recon did get closer to it, but strangely, they still have yet to turn on the pressure readings, and looks like SFMR readings. So we're only getting, no, they do have SFMR readings. So so far, for the most part, the highest SFMRs I've been seeing are just a little bit over 45 knots so far off this pass.
All right, thank you for that. If Laura was moving at a slower speed, would it intensify faster? Not sure if it would intensify faster, but it would intensify more with more time.
Yeah, the more time the storm gets, the more it has for intensifying even more down the line here.
Okay, any further thoughts?
Well,
I want to provide some
go ahead.
tips on personal safety for those who are seeking shelter and evacuating from the evacuation zones that are posted on the government website and other sources. If you're going to a shelter, make sure you follow your usual COVID-19 precautions. Ready.gov has a section on how to prepare for COVID-19, which I'll read out a few, just so you are more comfortable with the comfortable. If you must, one of the tips is that if you must go to a community or group shelter, remember to follow the latest guidelines from the CDC for protecting yourself and your family. Make sure you have cleaning items with you, such as soap, hand sanitizer, disinfecting wipes, or general household cleaning supplies to disinfect surfaces. Maintain at least 6 feet between you and persons not part of your immediate family while at the shelter, as much as possible. And only use generators outdoors and away from windows.
Yep, and we're looking at what's on Isaac's screen here with more information. And do you want to give people the link for that, Isaac?
Yeah, the link for this is, let me put this up here. It's the Texas Government Hurricane Center. Just type up this Texas Hurricane Center. Probably the first result. I'll try to link it in the chat here in a second when I get the chance to. But this gives you crucial information that they need to know in advance for this storm. And while I'm at this page already, I'm going to go ahead and read off the mandatory evacuations and voluntary evacuations. If you don't mind, I'll read that. Mandatory evacuations are in effect for the following areas of Texas: the city of Galveston, Texas; Hardin County, Texas; Jasper County, Texas; Jefferson County, Texas; Newton County, Texas; Orange County, Texas; and the city of Port Arthur, Texas, are where mandatory evacuations are in effect for those areas. Voluntary evacuations are in effect for the city of Baytown, Texas, with zip code specific 77520 and 707523 for vulnerable populations in low-lying areas: Bolivar Peninsula, Brazoria County, Chambers County, Harris County Zones A and B, Jamaica Beach, the city of Jamaica Beach, the city of Nassau Bay, the city of Seabrook, and also the city of Tiki Island for voluntary evacuations in the city of Texas. Nathan.
Did you just say the city of Texas?
Yeah, not the city of Texas. I meant the city of Tiki Island, Texas.
In the state of Texas.
Yeah.
We're getting it all wrong tonight.
My connection may
We
have
really
popped out
are.
for a second. I apologize.
All right, that's okay. What is the maximum storm surge that we can expect from Laura?
13 feet, if memory serves me right, I believe, right?
Well, for 13 feet, based on a landfall intensity of 100 knots. So if it makes landfall at that intensity, we'd be looking at 9 to 13 feet. But obviously, if it's stronger than that by a significant amount, it would be significantly higher storm surge. So it's another case of have to see what the storm does first before we can tell you the full story.
Well, that's a shame. Orlando, any further thoughts that you've seen, or any more to say on the recon observations?
Well, what I think is quite interesting.
maybe nothing then because he cut out.
Whoa.
I was waiting with bated breath there. Alright, well, here is the imagery once again, the latest visible, and we're still looking at that. Not much is changing with the structure of the storm. We're here for another 35 minutes. Start your message with Force 13 all in text, and it will light up big and bright for us. How many more Gulf of Mexico storms do we expect this season? Oh, well, you name it, I don't know. What I can tell you is that ultra long range ensembles are suggesting that September will be pretty bad. We gotta say it right here, right now. September's probably going to be pretty bad. I would say that one major hurricane in the Western Caribbean / Gulf and another major hurricane in the Western Atlantic is a best case scenario at this point for September.
That's
Yeah, it's not looking good for that.
And that's not a very good outlook either, especially for Mexico and parts of the Caribbean and further south. In the United States, I have a feeling that the United States is going to have like another one or two hurricane landfalls at least, but obviously right now it's too early to tell. We're still monitoring the tropics, especially in the MDR region. Currently, there are no other designated systems at this point, but there is one that we do have tagged down that could be tagged by the NHC in the coming days.
Give this imagery another hour and maybe that convection will blow up all around this eye, and who knows what that might be leading to. You can see now an arc on the southeastern side there. Not sure whether it's positioned directly over the storm's eye. It's hard to tell there with the high level clouds, but certainly arcing around with some persistence there. So once that completes, then who knows what we'll have underneath, and maybe that will really denote some significant intensification. You can see as well some of the clouds, the very peripherals of the storm, will be about to reach Louisiana this evening. You won't feel much from the very peripheral bands, it's the high level stuff. But the main bulk of the storm is still a good, what would we talk about, maybe 18 to 24 hours. 18 if it gets a move on quickly. 24 is probably what you'd expect before you start seeing inclement conditions along the coast of Louisiana. So there we are right now, and some showers in association with the storm spreading over the Yucatan as well.
Well, the good news is Recon appears to have finally started heading to the centre.
Oh, right.
So we should see near the top of the hour what the centre path looks like.
They finally turned on pressure readings as well too.
Good. Yeah. I was just gonna interrupt by mentioning that something I've been noticing is that supposedly now there is lightning that's starting to pop up in the convection that's surrounding what we assume is the eye.
If that's the case, that's very bad.
And you look again on the visible imagery, yeah, I'm getting a bit more convinced that this convection is aligning pretty well with where the eye is, even though we can't really see the eye anymore.
From my perspective, it's starting to wrap around the centre.
Yep, that's what it's looking like. And what's that
just
at the
going
very end? Just another little shoot starting to go up on the northwestern side. We'll keep monitoring that. Nelson?
Just going back to the recon information, the NOAA plane has found tropical storm force winds in the northwestern quadrant of 110 statute miles from the center. And yes, they did turn on the pressure readings as they dropped below 16,000 feet and are currently at just above 8,000 feet. So they are going to take the relatively high accuracy readings from the lower levels.
So there you have it. We'll have more information on that. Is that every 10 minutes, is it?
Yes.
Alright, well, we'll take a very short break here, get some more thoughts together. We'll be back in just a moment here on Force 13 Live with another half hour of coverage on Hurricane Laura. This is Force 13 Live. Oh, everything's gone. There it is. We are back here with more on Hurricane Laura. But before we get back to that, because we may struggle to mention it, we do also have Typhoon Bavi, which will magically appear in the center. There it is. Still a significant typhoon. Look at that. That's headed towards the Korean Peninsula. That is still at least a borderline Category 3 storm there. We have it down as a Category 3 indeed. And moving towards the north fairly slowly on that imagery, but it is the rapid scan on the Himawari. That's every 2.5 minutes. Visible's just starting to come in on that. So that is the latest on Bavi. We have a stream ongoing on the Force 13 channel with the latest satellite imagery on that. Anything you want to... Oh, Isaac's shown us that as well.
Yes, this is 10-minute imagery off of Himawari 8 here. This isn't target imagery, because if it was target, you would see the sides kind of squished in a little bit here because it focuses on one area. But yeah, you can see how Bavi has been organizing through the past few hours here. Let me go ahead and reload the page because this is imagery about an hour old here, but you can see the eye quite
new
clearly
eye
there.
is starting to break through.
And still a serious storm for the Koreas here later on down the line.
That's a very interesting final image, that.
Yeah, and this imagery is about an hour old. I forgot to refresh the page when we were on break, but yeah, I'll get the latest in a little bit.
Never mind. So that's Bavi right now, and I'm sure we'll have an update on that pretty soon on the channel, a standard update, once we get ourselves sorted. But looking again at the latest satellite imagery, this is pretty much up to the minute. GOES 16 rapid scan, and it looks like that convection, the cloud tops there extending a little bit more now around the northern side. Must say this is looking a little bit ominous. I think we're all agreed on that.
Definitely.
The edge of the eye starting to become better defined, even with the eye being cloud filled. A few questions about what Laura is on the CDPS. Certainly earlier today it was a CDPS stage 6, which is quite devastating.
May I correct that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure Devon said it was a mid-range 5.
Mid-range 5.
Moving towards the 6. And I believe a 6 would require increased rainfall or a stronger landfall.
So a mid-range stage 5 on that 10-tiered scale, I think that still is the devastating category. Okay, more questions here. Could Hurricane Laura affect Atlantic Canada when it gets pulled back into the Atlantic after landfall? Maybe. I'm not sure if it will be tropical or not.
There are some suggestions that Laura might turn extratropical over the central United States and then intensify as an extratropical cyclone to bring gale force conditions to the northeast of the US.
Wow. Wow. Okay, more questions here, I think. There isn't really a storm that we can compare to Laura. The best I can think of is Rita. That's more of a statement there. And indeed, it is quite far away from Rita. How would you feel living in the Bahamas, hearing about Tropical Storm Dorian in 2025? What?
I think that's a remark on the fact that Dorian hasn't been retired, but it's only a matter of course that it will be retired. The meeting of the World Meteorological Organization was postponed for the year due to COVID-19. I don't think that's a legitimate concern for anyone in the Bahamas.
I don't know. Some people a little bit disgruntled about how everyone compares storms all the time. I know it's crazy, but I think it's a natural thing to do. You always try and grab a previous example, a precedent for everything, don't you? Ryan, anything you'd like to say? You've been a little bit quiet recently.
I mean, we're talking about potential analogs here for Laura.
Oh boy, here we go.
Rita is probably the best one, but the thing about Rita is that it was one of the strongest hurricanes ever in the Gulf. I don't think Laura's going to be quite that. Hopefully not. It made landfall as a Cat 3 on the Texas-Louisiana border. Laura is pretty much forecast to make landfall in the exact same area and have actually very similar impacts, very similar storm surge amounts. I think Rita had storm surge up to 15 feet in southwest Louisiana, and Laura currently having about 9 to 13 feet is the current forecast. So, I think Rita is the best analog. I guess maybe you could compare it to Ike. Ike, I think, made landfall. Did it make landfall in the Galveston area? I think it did.
It made landfall just to the east of downtown Houston as a 110-mile-an-hour storm.
Yeah. Also, probably, just shy of major hurricane intensity. So, it isn't really that big of a difference. 110 miles an hour, 115, but still a very dangerous storm either way. But Ike was another very big storm surge event for eastern Texas and southwestern Louisiana, and this could be, very similar.
This is what the rest of the Atlantic looks like once it loads up. There is the rest of the Atlantic Ocean, looking pretty quiet, although a few people have been mentioning little bits here and there, especially waves coming off the African coast. I don't suppose you have any forecasted storms out of those just now. I think we've got enough on our plate right now.
The 2-week tropical outlook from NOAA has a high chance of tropical development in the Atlantic.
Well, but you'd be right saying that at any point of the year by the looks of things.
It's for the waves that the models have been developing around the day 7 or beyond mark.
Yeah, I think there's going to be something there in early September. There may even be a little bit of a lull in the Atlantic, but I do think that when you get to the second week of September at the latest, there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. What are our predictions for Hurricane Laura maximum wind speed? Now, of course, we are a team, and a lot of us have a few different views. I think Ethan wants it to be a Category 4 on the forecast, not actually wanting it, but forecasting it. I'm a little bit more conservative than Ethan is. I would still only forecast, well, you look at it right now, I'd probably forecast a mid-range Category 3.
Well, I haven't been following these storms for all that long, but in my experience, the most intense ones tend to be under-forecasted, and they outperform by a long way. So if Laura decided to do that, we wouldn't really see it coming.
That's the thing with all the most intense storms. And people think forecasters are rubbish because it's always the big ones more likely that they're getting it wrong, because when you're forecasting something, to an extent you're using the climatological norms as well, and it's a rare occasion and rather unpredictable to get a storm rapidly intensifying.
It's in fact the most unpredictable thing to forecast besides tornadoes.
Yeah, because you don't know how long a period of rapid intensification will go on for either.
Or how fast it will be, because it's all dependent on subtle changes in storm structure.
Alright, some more questions then for the team. Could Laura somewhat regenerate in the Atlantic if the cone is correct? Had a similar question not long ago. I think it could.
I think it would be a extratropical to tropical transition if that did happen.
Will Laura weaken before landfall like Marco? Well, if you think it's going to do exactly what Marco did, I would not hold out hope for that. But it could weaken slightly before landfall, but I think we could still be looking at a Category 3 landfall. Due to the shear at the last part before landfall and the landfall making friction itself, does the Gulf Coast have a bit of a bigger risk of tornadoes than normal for a tropical system?
Well, there's been historically big outbreaks of tornadoes from Gulf landfalling systems. The top two are, I believe...
Ivan's one of them.
Ivan is one, and the other was one that made landfall in Texas. Might have been...
Beulah?
I think it was Carla or Beulah.
It was one of the 60s storms.
It was either Carla or Beulah. I know Carla produced an EF4, I think, in Texas.
Wow.
So did
yeah.
Ivan when it made landfall somewhere.
Yeah, so it wasn't the only one.
These areas are prone to tornadoes from hurricanes, yes.
Could Hurricane Laura be a big rainfall problem for Newfoundland and Labrador? That's quite a way out just now.
That is quite a way out, and I doubt it will have as much tropical moisture as it does now when it gets there.
Certainly. Let's take a look at some more infrared imagery then on my screen here. So again, we're looking at the storm on the sandwich imagery. It's one of my favourites actually. And again, you can see in the last, this is a an hour and a half loop of the storm. The latest image on here is at 41 minutes past, so it's only 2 minutes old. And you can see once again the wrapping here that begins there it is, and it continues over, and in the last few minutes it's had a much more pronounced turning over on the northern side, which is quite fascinating to see, and it would appear to me still that is a big harbinger of intensification there, and we might get that eye popping out again in the not too distant future looking at that imagery.
I can see what you mean. There's a new convection trying to fire off a little bit to the northwest here on the last few frames. So it's trying to wrap itself around to consolidate a little bit better here, by the looks of it. And recon, just a little recon update. They're not, they haven't entered the eye wall yet. They're still just in kind of the outer bands of the storm. And in terms of peak winds so far, looks like to me, peak SFMRs they've recorded so far is about 45 knots in the outer bands.
Still some way to go on that one then.
Mm-hmm.
How long do you think it will be before they get to the center then?
They're not too far away from it, so I would expect maybe within the beginnings of next hour.
Oh no! Well, we're finishing at the end of this hour.
Yeah, it's just a shame. I don't know why they didn't go like straight into it. I guess they had to probably because they had to lower down in the atmosphere to get better readings, I'm assuming. So
Of
took
course,
them a little while.
any news that comes in, we'll be all over it on our social platforms and Facebook and Twitter, and of course regular video updates on our YouTube channel. Weather
I'm sorry.
Rush sends us a message saying, how many named storms do you think we will have? Thanks very much for the contribution, by the way. Everything that we get in support is, we makes our coverage better in the future, because that's where it all goes. And I think we'll have quite a lot. Yuxineda, go ahead.
I was gonna say what you just said.
Oh, right. And the eye is forming, according to this, according to Andrew, on this not radar, infrared imagery, and you can see it much more clearer there than what I've just shown you actually on this infrared imagery. The black zones there, that's minus 70 degrees cloud tops, and the center point there is around minus 55 maybe. So you can see it wrapping around, and that's a little bit worrying looking at that imagery. I'm not sure what you guys think of that.
Yeah, I'm
It's a
looking
bit
at the
worrying.
same imagery. Looking at the same imagery you're looking at on my screen share here, and yeah, I'm seeing it trying to wrap around on that northwestern side. In fact, on the last few frames there, see a pronounced burst of convection
Oh,
trying
it
to get
really
going on
is.
the northwestern side.
Yeah, it does seem that this will be pretty problematic if this does end up fulfilling a whole wraparound what we believe to be the eye. So that
And I
may be
think
a
what I-
sign of
That ain't
intensification.
looking good.
And I just want to, before we head off for tonight, I want to go over the mandatory and voluntary evacuations for Texas right now. And if Nelson's still here, I'd like him to also, if he's able to also go over the mandatory and voluntary evacuations for Louisiana if he's still here. But according to 2 p.m., as of the 2 p.m. last update, mandatory evacuations again are in effect for the city of Galveston, Texas, Hardin County, Texas, Jasper County, Texas, Jefferson County, Texas, Newton County, Texas, Orange County, Texas, and the city of Port Arthur, Texas. Those are mandatory evacuations in effect for those following areas. Voluntary evacuations are in effect for the following areas: the city of Baytown, Texas, zip code specific 77520 and 77523 for variable populations in low-lying areas. Bolivar Peninsula, Texas, Brazoria County, Texas, Chambers County, Texas, Harris County, Texas in zones A and B, the city of Jamaica Beach, Texas, the city of Nassau Bay, Texas, the city of Seabrook, Texas, and the city of Tiki Island, Texas, as of the 2 p.m. update. And those are voluntary evacuations in effect for those areas.
Unless Nelson chimes in, I'd just like to say that Recon has updated.
Okay, what's the news?
Very good. And,
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's Nelson go ahead first, please.
just to round out the evacuations, Isaac hit Texas, and for Louisiana, Calcasieu Parish, Cameron Parish. They both have issued mandatory evacuations. There are voluntary evacuation orders in effect for Allen, Beauregard, and Jeff Davis parishes.
Orlando?
Yeah, I was just going to say that the Reconnaissance Flight NOAA 2 has updated, and they recorded, so far they're starting to record hurricane force, flight level winds, hurricane force. And the lowest pressure so far is 991 millibars.
How far from the center do you think?
I'd imagine it's a little bit further out.
Looking at the coordinates, they're
A short.
then about entering where the convective burst is on the northwest side of the eye.
Okay.
That's roughly where they are, just outside of that.
So it looks like the pressure will be deeper than 990 then if they're getting 991 there.
And also getting hurricane force flight level winds in what was until very recently a comparatively open part of the eye.
That's
convection.
true. That's very true. So I think we may be looking at a stronger storm at the next advisory, maybe 85 or 90 miles per hour.
I can tell you that the HMOM has loaded for the latest run.
Okay, latest model run.
It has a landfall intensifying up until landfall, and it makes landfall at 9:53 in Cameron, which would be a high-end Category 3.
And again, a realistic number, really. We've had all kinds of model runs that have been saying anything from the 930s to the 970s, so 950 right in the middle.
And while the HWRF is coming out, it agrees with the HMON on a major hurricane by hour 18, which is a little over 12 hours from now.
Yeah, because of the initiation time. So by the time we're waking up tomorrow, if those models are correct, what was that, Category 3?
Yeah, mid 960s and dropping.
Wow. I could see that happening when you look at that thing right now.
Well, the HWRF has a rather strange structure to begin with lots of mesovortices in the eye wall and strange intensification stuff, and then it just clears up and it's a major hurricane. So usually when it shows strange structure, it indicates significant strengthening.
Very strange indeed, but I'm just mesmerized looking at those cloud tops on the northern edge of the eye, and
Still blowing up in the latest frames.
still blowing up, and a few other little areas blowing up on the southeastern side. That's probably where the strongest winds will be, or northeast.
Yeah, I'm looking at the HMON, and it has it making landfall. Looks like it's a 953 millibar storm in extreme southwestern Louisiana here.
In Cameron.
At about. Go ahead.
In Cameron, yes.
Yeah.
The HWRF has come out up to hour 24, which would be 18 hours from now, and it has it at 9:53, the same as the H1.
Oh my goodness.
But this is 12 hours
There
from
it
landfall still and intensifying. So it looks like the HWRF may be going for a Category 4 peak again.
Well, that's not good.
No, especially since it's had a lot of recon assistance and it tends to perform very well in the up to 2-day time frame with recon.
David, our very own David, has asked me personally, what is the lowest pressure that you've seen in the models? Do you really want to know? The NAM 3 kilometer wanted 885, but we throw that one in the trash can, really.
The
3 kilometer.
worst I've seen from the models was the HWRF twice peaked with a Category 5 6 hours before landfall and a pressure in the low 920s.
CHP 6 the 910s. But that's another very dubious model.
And hi to everybody.
Oh my goodness, he's in.
You never know. You
He
never
said his
know.
name too many times. He's like
Goodness me.
Beetlejuice.
And Nelson actually having an argument in the comments section right now. Nelson shouting at David, "Put up your weather station." David says that Nelson, please. Well, let's put that aside for one moment.
Nelson, I'll just say, and the viewers, we're on the verge of a second outbreak of the virus. It is getting ugly, even in my own place. But the Laura, she's looking very healthy, and the key question is how deep is she going to go? My thoughts are with the people over there in Louisiana, and also Bavi
Eastern Texas,
is looking it's looking very healthy over there to the south
It
of
certainly is.
the Korean Peninsula, and it's all happening. But
This is peak season, yes.
yes, and I'm
what
wondering,
is that? Hold on a minute. Isaac, what are you showing us there?
That's the
Ooh.
HWRF in 24 hours time.
The HWRF in 24 hours time wants the storm to look like that.
Yes.
So that's probably a pretty bad case scenario. Might convince some people to evacuate there. You definitely should if you're in a mandatory.
in that image, it's a high-end Category 3 with a pressure of 953 millibars.
And again, I must stress.
Yes.
I must stress to everybody, if you're deciding to evacuate, or still deciding whether or not to prepare for it, you have till about 8 in the morning tomorrow to prepare for it before tropical storm force conditions. The earliest reasonable time for tropical storm force conditions to be felt on the coastline. So you have till about 8 or 9 in the morning tomorrow to decide whether or not you're going to evacuate or finish your hurricane preparations. After that point, it's going to be too dangerous to be out and about doing stuff and getting preparations done. And just you got to hunker down where you are or go to a nearby shelter if you have one nearby you and just hunker down the storm there. But you have a few hours till to do that. So take all this time we have ahead of you for advantage and get prepared and get out if you're under mandatory evacuation.
Nathan, can I just ask Nelson a question before we
Yeah, of course.
finish up? Considering Nelson's location, is he evacuating or is he staying put?
Nelson's all right. He's quite away from the storm, but I'll let him speak if he's there.
No, that's fine. I was just wondering.
Sorry,
Is
I
it-
was on mute. I'm
Nelson-
about 240 miles east of the expected landfall
East,
area. Now,
right.
of course, if there were a major shift in tracks, it would have been a consideration. While the cone was still closer to me in the last couple of days, especially over the weekend, evacuation was a consideration based on the models. I had actually already prepared some boxes for things that I would want to bring with me just in case, but that necessity has abated with the changing storm track.
Looking at that
Nathan-
infrared imagery, though, you can see the black areas continue to stretch around the cyclone. And to be honest with you, if you see that complete a black ring around the eye there, and you see greens and blues in the eye, that's probably a major hurricane. We're not there yet, but that's what we could be waking up to tomorrow morning.
Nathan, would that bring it forward? If that happened, could
If
the
it's a major
NHC
hurricane
bring it
tomorrow
forward?
morning, you know it means business and you need to get out of there.
Yeah, and again, like I said, off the latest National Hurricane Center forecast, they expect that the earliest reasonable time for tropical storm force winds to be felt along the coastline at around 8 or 9 in the morning tomorrow. So you have till then to decide if you want to get out or if you're going to stay put. And I would highly recommend getting out if you're under mandatory evacuation. That's not something to joke about with at all. Get out of there and stay safe. That's what I would recommend. I know it may be hard with these current times, but this is a more immediate threat right now, and your life is on the line here if you don't evacuate in those mandatory evacuation areas.
Oh,
David?
definitely.
And storm surge is going to be a key factor.
It's a
Nelson,
biggie.
have you had a chance to look at the tides for the area, and what's the expected landfall time estimated?
Sorry to interrupt you, David, but Recon just made a new pass through the eye of the storm, and they found a minimum central pressure, flight level that is, of 983.9 millibars. 983.9 millibars.
It's intensifying. That much is pretty clear. Landfall expected on Wednesday night, David, or maybe early Thursday morning. We're out of time here, though, at Force 13 HQ. We've been running this stream for 3 hours. We still have our other automated streams on the Force 13 channel, where you can track Bavi live, and you can look at imagery of Laura live, just like this, on the Force 13 US channel. Search Force 13 US to get that, and that will show radar later on as well. But in the meantime, we're going off the air here for a while. We'll have some video updates and social media posts as well, and we'll be back, I imagine, very soon to have more live coverage on this, probably tomorrow morning. So I would stay tuned on that and subscribe to the channel for the latest updates. Thanks for watching.